You remember when we used to be able to drive from Hoyks Hollow all the way through over the cut on Quidnet?
Yeah.
All right, everybody, it's 5 o'clock, so we're gonna get this show on the road. I'll begin by reading our remote script, and then we will get to tonight's agenda, because I believe we're all here. Okay. So as a preliminary matter, this is Ashley Erisman, Chair of the Nantucket Conservation Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mark Beal.
Aye.
Seth Engelborg.
Aye.
Erisman, aye. Ian Golding.
Aye.
Dave LaFleur.
Aye.
Maureen Phillips.
Aye.
Joe Topham.
Aye.
Okay. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jeff Carlson.
Here.
Joanne Dodd.
Aye.
And anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Looks like we have Rachel Freeman.
Aye.
Hi. Art Gasparo.
Here.
Ryan Maxwell.
Here.
Brian Madden.
Here.
And is that Paul Santos on the iPhone?
I'm here.
All right, perfect. So good evening. This open meeting of the Nantucket Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Nantucket Conservation Commission is convening by video conference via Zoom app, as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you may broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. So I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the list of members, inviting each by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or your computer when you are not speaking. And please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. And for items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. Staff will activate the chat feature on YouTube. Members of the public who have comments or questions can use this feature to communicate with the public body. Instructions are on the town's website. The chair and/or staff will do their best to address the questions and comments. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So with that, we will get to the first item on the agenda. Under public meeting, we have public comment. I'm not sure if we have public comment. Jeff, do you know if public comment's been activated yet?
Sorry, it just was. Sorry.
That's okay. So we'll give the public just a minute in case they have something to say, and then we will get on with our notices.
We only have 10 people watching, so I'm thinking that it's probably pretty unlikely. But
Okay. Well, I'll start listing the continuances, and if the public comments in between, we will answer those comments. So the following items are continued this evening under notices of intent. We have the Town of Nantucket DPW town-wide. That is continued until January 28th. We have Troja Nominee Trust at 26 Easy Street, continued until January 7th. We have Killian at 10 Mayhew Lane, continued until January 28th. And Randy Sharp at 1 Wamasquid Place, continued until January 7th. That looks like all of our continuances this evening. And we don't have public comment at this point, so we will get on with the public hearing under notices of intent. And we will begin with Nantucket Island's Land Bank, all land bank properties. And this is represented by Rachel Freeman.
Good evening. Thanks, Ashley. I am back for the Nantucket Land Bank in an attempt to further discuss our general notice of intent and get additional guidance from the commission. I submitted more information about the differences between maintenance and repair, and additional information about Vista Pruning, as well as some maps which showed the property locations for exactly where we were proposing to do some of the work that we were asking to have permission to do. In going back and kind of reviewing my original submission, I had a number of thoughts, one of which was, I know the commission requested maintenance logs, and I think while that may not be entirely possible, I think the important thing is that we would be basically requesting every 3 years we'll be renewing this. So there's lots of opportunities to see if something's changed in what we're doing. And the request for maintenance logs, I'd be interested to see if you have any ideas for something that might be slightly less involved. A maintenance log would basically be a record of every single thing that our staff does for property management every day of the year. So I feel like I didn't really fully follow up on that, but I did follow up on the Vista Pruning question and provided an example of an area where the land bank has been doing Vista Pruning for any number of years, which was Settlers Landing. And I'm not sure that it's necessarily of concern. Actually, most of the properties that we've proposed Vista Pruning, it's actually been ongoing to some degree. There's areas where there hasn't been Vista Pruning before that are in my list, but I wanted to sort of open that discussion tonight because I know it's very controversial, and I feel like there's a strong public benefit to Vista Pruning in some areas, and it can be done in a mindful way that's not damaging to the vegetation or the resource area. And I also have another bigger concern, which is that basically when we don't Vista Prune mindfully in the way that we want to, what happens is abutters are going and Vista Pruning on our property, and they do it however they want, and that's really challenging. And it happens all the time. So we would rather be taking matters into our own hands. And then I have abutters that come to me and say, why can't you prune this? Because they ask me to do it, and their neighbor has, chopped it down to nothing on our property. So it's just puts us in a really difficult situation where I would like to be able to just able to do these things, this maintenance activity, in a very mindful way that the commission felt comfortable with. And then I think the other thing which I just touched upon is I sort of defined maintenance versus repair for some of our structural maintenance activities. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean maintenance versus repair, repair versus replacement, basically. And I sort of cut it off at about 25%. So I figure if we're repairing 25% of a structure, be it a dock, be it a walkway, boardwalk, bulkhead, anything like that, I would cover that under maintenance. Anything greater than 25%, and I would think it would have to come into the Concom because it would be more of a full-blown repair or replacement, really. So that was where I made that cut, and I feel like 25% is pretty good way to estimate. Most of our fixes are pretty small, but occasionally we have repairs that are kind of major, but once it goes over 25%, then it's more like a replacement and would need permission from need a notice of intent. So I am more than happy to answer any questions if you have additional questions, and just get more guidance on this notice of intent.
Thank you, Rachel. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can speak to the maintenance logs part because I was the one requesting that. I'm not asking for the land bank to provide like all of their daily work activities. That's overbearing. Essentially, what I see proposed here is all of the expected activities that the land bank may do in a 3-year period. But it's possible that they might not do every single one of them each year. So just an accounting of what actually was done versus what didn't happen that year, just a list is all I'm asking for, so that we don't even need a description of the work done. Just here are the properties that actually received maintenance activity in 2021. Here's what received maintenance in 2022. Here's what received maintenance in 2023. That's all I'm asking for. And then in terms of the Vista pruning, I appreciate you including the picture from Settlers Landing. I think it helps us illustrate what we're talking about. And I think that this is a little bit difficult because the proposed locations aren't in place yet. But if there's a way to just take a picture of all the proposed locations and just do a digital rendering, or even just like block out with a marker on a photograph the area that's going to be cut for all the new locations and like what the general species assemblage is, that would really help us understand what it's going to look like. I don't think, at least how I see it, I don't have anything wrong with Vista pruning, and I totally appreciate your concern that if land bank doesn't do it, someone else will. I have a concern when there's not a set expectation and we see drastic change. So just like having an expectation of the height and the species and the look is going to be important moving forward. And then lastly, in terms of the structural repair versus maintenance, I think 25% is a good starting point, but I think we need a little bit more specificity into what is actually being worked on. For instance, if it's a dock, 25% of the like the top boards that, sorry, I'm not an engineer here, the top boards that you walk on versus 25% of the piers actually holding up the dock is a lot different. We're talking about just replacing some wood versus actually going into the water and the resource area and doing something that's touching resource area. So I think just a little bit of specificity, a little bit more specificity on that would be helpful rather than an overall percentage. I think it's a good starting point, but just looking at maybe defining what's direct impacts versus what's sort of auxiliary impacts.
Okay, that's really helpful.
Thank you, Seth. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Mark?
I have a question through the chair, if I may, Ashley, of Jeff or Joanne. Excuse me. Are we breaking new ground with this sort of a open-ended, not open-ended, but across the board NOI around the state? Is this done around the state? Other commissions that have a lot of wet areas, damp resource areas like we have, or is this an established procedure?
Jeff, do you have an answer for that?
Sure, I'll take a shot. So there are a few. I was finally able today, I just didn't get it sent out in time, to get an example of an order. It's a little bit older, from the town of Spencer today, who did one for their highway department back in the, I think around 2011, 2012, that they did the first one. I know we've seen them more focused before on, there are some singular parcels where there's a lot of activities that are different on the mainland, where they're just huge pieces of land and they're applying essentially for maintenance activities across, a few hundred acres that are a little bit different, are probably the most relevant examples. At the same time, I personally, not to editorialize too much, think that this is something that is needed, because I think it's always a big question. And one of the things that we kind of take some of the most requests in on are things like, especially with the town one, I know this isn't the town one, but are they allowed to do what they're supposed to be doing? Are they doing it correctly? I always kind of harken back to the time that Maya Comet Road was resurfaced improperly and not to the right specifications, that it was considered roadway maintenance. And when we even checked with DEP, that was considered roadway maintenance. And I think, kind of the genesis of this is the idea that you're putting together kind of a standard operating procedure to deal with sensitive areas and what that expectation would be. So if someone does call, it's easy to track down, and you're not trying to play chase with it a little bit. So I think that's kind of where it started. But the most direct answer is it's not super common, but from the sounds of it, it sounds like more communities are interested in kind of doing these things.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other, Ian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Rachel, could you give me more background as to why you're asking for this? Because it's not as though you're in front of us even every month, and people have brought up that it could be setting a difficult precedent. And I gather that, this will include photo monitoring before and after a project. I look at Lily Pond and the walkway there, and there's a double walkway, which is 200 yards. So at 25%, that would be 50 yards that could be replaced. And, going forward, when you retire, and you see where I'm getting at here. Thank you.
Right. So there's two things. One is that, again, I think the commission is really going to have the right to review this in 3 years. So I think that's huge, and you could completely change it. So I think that's a big thing. I recognize that this is precedent setting. It's interesting because, take Lily Pond, for example. And I don't know the measurements off the top of my head, but we do, in fact, have an area which I'm supposed to permit repairing this winter, but it wasn't even a discussion. And I'm trying to think, it's the old section of the boardwalk, the oldest part. I'm guessing it's 50 yards, So I think it probably definitely is, but if I was going to wholesale replace that much boardwalk, I would never think of not coming in for an NOI. But you do make a good point. What if I get hit by a bus tomorrow? And I don't think I'm quite ready to retire, but who knows? I get hit by a bus tomorrow and somebody else has my job. They still have these permissions and they feel differently about these things. So I think, you know, it's tricky. Similarly, I would just never put a piling in without talking to the Concom, but I'm having trouble sort of defining some of these things. And I think maybe this is part of the reason I wanted to continue to have the discussion is it does sound like it's really just about additional information and fully explaining what these maintenance activities are. You know, it's really only the decking on top. We're never going to mess with the pilings or anything like that. So but I can elaborate all those little pieces, you know, and so I think it is more of that. The big reason why we're bringing this forward now is because there are a really large number of things that we do, and I don't want to get in trouble for saying this, but, you know, that are quote unquote grandfathered. You know, they've been established practices for I don't know how many years, way before my time. And they are in wetland resource areas. You know, we have trails through wetland resource areas. And I think mostly what we're doing isn't bringing anything new to the table. We're mostly just trying to sort of establish that and formalize that these are the practices that we have been doing. And we've been doing them really without any oversight, and it actually would provide the commission with more oversight over these things, in my opinion, than what we have now. We always go out and try and establish whether or not something's in a resource area first. The other thing too, you know, I'm jumping around for a second, but I just thought, you know, the other thing too is natural heritage now has an opportunity to chime in this. And, you know, it's going to take us a while, but we need to put together shape files of all the property that's in priority habitat that we have maintenance activities on for them to provide us feedback on it. So it also allows them to have a say. And I think that's a big part of it. Is that even though we've been mowing a trail for 25 years that's in a wetland resource area, now you guys could take a look at it and say, well, I know now they're mowing this trail in the wetland resource area. And every 3 years you'd have the capacity to say, I don't think you should be doing that anymore. Or, you know, conditions have changed here. So I think that's sort of why we brought this forward.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Rachel. I think that it might be a little bit more work up front to go through each of the structural elements and really define the activities that are expected. Because if you're saying in the meeting that the pilings are never going to be replaced, just the decking, that's fine. But putting that into the document so that we have an order of conditions that reflects that makes sense. And also, I like using easy numbers, 25%, but I don't want the commission to be stuck with that. And I don't want the land bank to have to be stuck with that either. Let's say you have 200 yards at the Lily Pond of Boardwalk and 53 yards needs to be repaired. So now you have 26.1% or something like that. I would expect us to, you know, allow that because it's such the change is essentially the same. So tying the land bank and the commission to hard numbers isn't necessarily the best thing. I think looking at the types of activities and the scope of activity is better, and then we can qualitatively say what's maintenance and what's repair. And I personally think it needs to be broke out for each specific element. But I think that getting that done now might be a little bit of effort, but will probably save the land bank and the Concom time in the long run.
Joe?
So Rachel, Marcia Fader has a pond on her property, and for years she's been maintaining it. I think it was like a couple hundred years. But we basically told her, yes, you're doing the right things. You're keeping the vases out of there, but et cetera. But we need something in writing that each year you can do X, Y, and Z. It doesn't really restrict her, but it gives her permission to work in a wetland. And I think it was just a simple email to Jeff or Joanne to say, I'm going to start this. This is popping up. But I agree with Seth. I think something needs to be in writing and memorialized for anything going forward. And if there is a change or something, then we say, oh, well, this changed, so can we correct this? And I like that there are trails that are maintained. I get it through wetlands. But I think if a wetland grows or something, we should just be able to reevaluate that. So that is something I'd really like to, why I think it's really smart to memorialize each and every task that's going to be happening. But I don't think every time you guys move out or do anything, you need to, contact us or let us know what's happening, because it's written within a report. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Jeff?
So kind of hearing what everyone said, I think some of it, and I will get the other order from Spencer out for everyone to see. I think the one thing that was interesting that was in there addresses a lot of this is they were requesting kind of a 1 year look ahead. So in the start of the year, the highway director was submitting to them kind of a list of a really rough schedule of what they were anticipating coming forward. So I think you can set kind of a rough time frame to that. I mean, I think the land bank is probably putting something similar together. Like, I don't think that Rachel and Jeff and Eric walk in on Tuesday and say, let's replace the boardwalk on Wednesday. I doubt that's happening. And I think it can be just that simple is to get that in there and then have that reporting behind it. And I think that's something that could go into an order in kind of a standard set. That order also did kind of condition by activity to some degree. There was a few like general conditions like that, and then an activity by activity kind of conditioning. That's helpful. And I think, from our end, one of the things that I think we like about this approach and kind of memorializing everything too is, we get even a lot of calls from the land bank for activities that have happened on their property that are done by abutters and end up in enforcement, and they get issued to the land bank or something happens. That this is a really good way for us administratively to track all of these activities better with the land bank. So if something does show up, we have clear documentation of what the violation is and maybe how to best remedy that, because it's always tricky on their properties, especially when there's 30 abutters and it's a trail through a wetland for a portion of it that connects like two different properties and who knows who did it. This would be super helpful in kind of dealing with those things.
Thank you, Jeff. I think it's important to remember also that even though we would be issuing them an order of conditions, if they go, outside of that scope, we can still call them back in for, potential enforcement to change things. Yes, Jeff?
Sorry, and not to interrupt, but to Seth's point too, I think the nice thing about having the order, and even if there are set percentages, obviously there's a little bit of tolerance to that we can talk about through an order, but they still always have the right to come in for either an amended order of conditions or even a minor modification. And if they came in to say, hey, we'd like to modify the order to allow for, 27% of the boardwalk at Lily Pond specifically to be maintained, it's the same oversight. It's there. And the nice part, at least for the land bank, is they're fee exempt. So it's not like they're paying to do it every time, but it would get them back in front of the commission to have that discussion and make that decision. And then everyone can feel comfortable that they're doing the work. The land bank knows that they're covered by a permit. You guys are comfortable that there are rules and restrictions to that. And then when the general public is out and available, they also know that there's, kind of parameters in place for what they should be working. And if they see something that seems to be strange or odd, it's an easy conversation to have.
Thank you, Jeff. Those are important points. Any other questions or comments from commissioners before we look to the public? Mark?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rachel, I'm just wondering if it would make any sense to have it less than a 3-year permit, and very agreeable to renew it on an annual basis and extend maybe beyond a year if it works out. But I'm just a little reluctant to have an open-ended permit for 3 years. So but maybe you can discuss that with your staff. But I have a much higher comfort level if it were a shorter time. Thank you.
Jeff, is that something we could write into an order of conditions, have like an annual check-in that might, then give that schedule for what would happen the following year and describe what happened the past year?
Yeah, I think an annual report, I mean, it's something that we do on a lot of different projects, to have them come in and discuss what they did and kind of provide that to the commission, especially for the first couple of years. And then if new information comes in, or if we certainly see that there's adverse impacts that are happening, there are 2 kind of courses of action that you guys are legally allowed to take. So the first, obviously, is just our regular enforcement process and enforcement orders and ordering work done through there. The second is if new information comes about in regards to the permit, we still have an ability under the local bylaw to revoke a permit. So those 2 options are there. I mean, I think if you wanted to bring them in for a year-to-year, kind of re-blessing of the permit, I mean, I think you could certainly do that through the annual report. I have to work on the language for that a little bit, but I think that would be doable. And I mean, I think most of these are going to require reporting anyways, so I think that would be certainly possible to do. I don't want to speak for the land bank, but I think they would probably be more than happy to provide an annual report.
Thank you, Jeff. Rachel, do you think that's something that might be possible?
Yeah, I actually think that would be maybe a good way to go, because we do have a number of open permits that I'm required to do reporting on, but if I wrapped it all into one annual report, that would probably make more sense.
Okay, that's great.
I think I do have one question for the commission. And as you know, as long as I'm going through this process, I might as well ask for everything I want. But I guess my question is whether the commission would ever consider one of the fencing, like a split rail fence. One of the things we run into a lot is either encroachment issues or encroachment issues in wetland resource areas, where really the only way to resolve it, or the fastest way to resolve it, is to install a split rail fence. And I'm just wondering if the commission would ever entertain, and I don't know what the language would look like. I have an example in Sconset. We have a situation where we're going to have to install a fence, and it's outside of the 50. It's like 55 feet from the beach or the dune, and but it's not, and it's about 15 feet of fence. But that would be the type of example of something where we would come to the commission. We'd have to submit an NOI, or I guess we could do an RDA. But it's a submission, and most of these things are timely. Sometimes it's that somebody has a pretty major wetland violation and we just want it to stop. So we would like to put a fence in there. Most of the ways that we do that right now is by getting enforcement, and then we're allowed to respond to the enforcement. And a lot of times that includes a split rail fence. So I don't know if the commission would ever consider allowing some level of split rail fence installation, either, I don't know if it's outside the 50 or if it's only in issues of enforcement, or I don't know. I just thought I'd bring it up.
That's a good question, Rachel, because I know we do allow property owners to demarcate the 50 with split rails fairly frequently. I wonder though, because it is kind of would be new structure in some of these places, I think we would probably still want you to come before us in some capacity, would be my perspective. But but I don't know if Jeff has perspective on that or if other commissioners have feelings as well. Ian?
Well, I guess there's always the aesthetics involved. I'm very sympathetic to what Rachel is saying about people abusing the privilege of going on the paths and abutters' behavior. So, and I know you're not allowed to use electric fences or other devices to get people's attention. So, but I think I would prefer not to give a carte blanche with that. Personally, I'm still having a slight trouble with 25%, Madam Chair, if I may, because it's like the old saw of, Daniel Webster, every dog knows when it's kicked on purpose. And here, what's the difference between repair and maintenance? Maintenance, obviously, if there's a few boards in a boardwalk need replacing, that's maintenance. If you pull up, 20-yard section, is that repair? So, anyway, that's just me, the way I'm thinking about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. I as well still see a very fuzzy line between the repair and maintenance. So I understand that feeling there. Seth, you had your hand up.
Yeah, if I may, for Rachel, are the nature of these fences considered temporary to deal with just the enforcement issue, or are they intended to be permanent?
They're usually permanent. Usually it's a recurrent issue and something that we've just had not a lot of luck managing in other ways. Fencing is definitely not our first choice. It just ends up happening sometimes. So, but I completely understand if it's something that makes sense to come back in for. That's fine. And I'm thinking, when I'm listening to everyone's concerns about 25, 10 is 10% might be a better start, and then just more clarification for individual structures as to what's maintenance versus repair. I don't know if that sounds better to people, 10%, and then, right, and then some individual explanations.
Thank you, Rachel. I know 10% makes me more comfortable in most cases. Seth, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think it's important also to note not only the 10%, but the frequency of that happening. So if you have a boardwalk, you repair 10% 1 month, 10% 3 months later, and then 10% 2 years after that, that's not maintenance anymore. It's like the old story, if you're on a boat and you replace one plank every day until the whole boat's been replaced, you have a different boat. You don't have the same boat anymore. So I think, I don't know if, I think limiting it to 10% over the life of a 3-year permit is potentially not helpful, because 3 years is a long time, especially given the weather and climate and all sorts of issues we deal with here. But I think there needs to be some clarification of, after 10% has been done, there's a period, or after 10% has been done on one structure, then the land bank has to come in for any further maintenance on that structure in that 3-year period.
Good idea. Thank you, Seth. So Maureen had her hand up, and then Joe, you had yours up. Oh, you're muted, Maureen.
I wanted to mention 2 things. One is that I think having these annual meetings, there a lot of all the questions, like if it's 10% one quarter and then 10% another quarter, if we're having kind of an annual review, there's going to be better understanding. And also, Rachel, you'll be, obviously you have to plan out what you're going to be doing. So if you're going to want to replace half of a particular structure over the course of a year, that's the kind of thing and you would go in and maybe do it over, 3 or 4 times, doing it that way. That's or you believe it's likely you're going to have to come back, that kind of thing. So there's a just a sense of having an idea of where on island we're having, more troubles, where are wetlands expanding, where are butters being more crazy, whatever. And secondly, I wanted to mention, a lot of this discussion has been around the fact that abutters can be very unhelpful. And I don't know the answer to this, but how much are homeowners aware of the restrictions on, vista pruning and, other actions they may take when the land bank is their abutter? Does anyone ever sent anything like when they buy the property, and oh, by the way, one of your neighbors is the land bank, and they're they have special protections, or however we would put it. Have we done any kind of education of the public, or is that something that would be useful at all? I'm not sure who I'm directing this to, but.
It sounds like Rachel has an answer or a thought.
Yeah, it's interesting you should mention that. We've recently sort of started to revamp our encroachment policy a little bit, because we have so much going on our properties, and the more property you acquire, the more neighbors you have. And I don't know really how many people know what the rules are or not. It's a really good question. How much of it is really just sort of accidental, oops, I thought it was okay, and how much of it is completely intentional? So I don't have a good read on that. I kind of want to think that most of humankind is doing things unintentionally, and that they're good natured. But we have talked about recently, we put together a land bank pamphlet, and we have an encroachment policy we just put together, and we are sending it out to anyone with potential issues and in areas where there are a lot of issues. So it's definitely something, it's more blanket mailings for areas where we're seeing tons of vista pruning. A perfect example is Ocean Ave, right? We don't really prune Ocean Ave that much, but everyone else prunes it for us. And then there's one woman who has called repeatedly and said, can you please trim this cherry tree that's right in front of my house? And I keep saying to her, no. Then she's like, but my neighbors just took down your entire hedgerow. And I think we've talked about this stuff before. It's just challenging. And I just feel for some of these people, and I just think that maybe we could do a little bit of a better job. But it is about education. There's a big piece of education that we're going to work on. Like, I think probably we should send that encroachment policy and the land bank pamphlet to everyone who lives on Ocean Ave. Not that everyone's doing the wrong thing, but there's a fair number of people who want a better view. So,
yeah. And, if I may, because I think unfortunately we see in terms of our permitting a lot of, if one wanted to be kind, it's well, they didn't know, or they, didn't understand, but there's also, I believe, a fair amount of, I want what I want, and I'm just going to go do that. And, and we've had a lot of turnover of property, and, there's a lot of things going on. So I think the more clear education we can provide, the better, because I do think, especially if they see that someone else has done it, well, of course, then I can. And the fact that they may be cutting down, flora that will take years to repair or replace, and I think a lot of people just don't think about that, what the long-lasting impact will be. So I think advising people in certainly sensitive areas would be a good idea, and maybe it's it's just something that maybe you put on your website, like a notice about, did you know, or something like that, just in terms of making it come up in front of people more often, especially people who are, newer, landowners, and, may not be aware, or even imagine that they might be limited in what they can do.
Thanks.
Right.
So Joel, I'll give it to
Thank
you in
you
a
for that.
second. Just do want to comment on this a little, because I feel like people are given the benefit of the doubt when really they honestly shouldn't be, because people know what trespassing is. If it's not your property, if it's not within your property bounds, you're not allowed to change it. You're not allowed to cut the vegetation there, period. And people kind of play games. And, I know this is anecdotal, but twice in the last year on the Gardner trails, I've run into like middle school aged boys building bike jumps where they're actually digging up the trail with shovels and like building jumps. And I've had to like literally squash like all of their afternoon fun to say, this isn't your property. What happens when somebody trips over this? You're going to have to take it down. So really kind of upping that education is important, but then, kind of punishing those repeat violators, because they do know better and they're trespassing. And, people send their landscapers, oh, when nobody's looking, go out there and cut it, and they know better. And the landscapers should certainly know better by now. So I think the more education and then enforcement we can do is probably appropriate to stop the behavior. It's unfortunate. Joe, you had your hand up forever ago now.
Okay, it's fine. Ladies first. I agree with the ad campaign. I think that would be really smart in some way, shape, or form. And Ashley, to your point, I watched Jeff Blackwell 2 weekends ago riding down a trail, and out of nowhere, someone put a high jump, and I watched him land on his head and go and dislocate his shoulders. So there's a lot of that activity going on that's really frustrating. And, and Rachel, you've been really good about communicating with us and saying, I think it was on Hollowell Lane, someone had done some pruning. But I think that this is where, a knock on the door from the sheriff and a ticket and, we execute a letter, an enforcement action, and really start to get the word out there that this is not acceptable. Because I really think it'd be a major problem coming forward. I mean, I asked Seth tonight if I could go play in the Linda Loring Foundation. He said no. So, no, joking. But I think you're on the right path, and I think you know what's going on. And I think it's just your organization and us working together to really stop some of these violations, or all of the violations. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Any other comments? Oh, Jeff?
Yeah, just really quickly. I was going to say, I think through an order to get back to the split rail fencing question and things of immediate nature like that, you maybe have the ability to, address encroachments that are problems through some level of staff approval with a kind of behind to come in front of the commission if it's something that's really pressing. I know we've kind of done that before, just in kind of extreme cases. Maybe possibility. I tend to agree with the education aspect and those kinds of things. And I totally lost my train of thought for the second thing I was going to say. And I don't remember. But we'll have another opportunity. So I'll remember by then, hopefully.
All right. If there aren't any more comments or questions from commissioners, we will look at public comment for this.
All right. There are. Wow, it's not even 6 o'clock yet. I'm already having trouble speaking. The Land Council has a comment. It just says the commission needs to weigh these blanket permits very carefully. The approval of blanket permits like this one and the DPW permit could cause serious problems for future commissioners and abutters. A 3-year permit for this many maintenance projects invites other large property owners to make similar requests of this commission and would greatly reduce the commission's oversight in these various resource areas. Is such a broad permit, such as this spanning 1 year possible, coming in once per year before the commission would save groups like the Land Bank and DPW significant time while allowing the commission more control over activities. And then he said, well, you just answered the 1 year question, Jeff. That's all from me. Thank you. So that's there. I just wanted to make a point to that really quickly. Just, I guess, my public comment. Right now, most of these activities or regular maintenance are happening with no oversight from the commission. It's a maintenance activity that they're doing. I mean, I always remember, Bruce Perry and I had quite a debate about the wetland right by the corner of Dewey Creek Road and that big grass field that he was mowing annually and didn't have a permit to do that. And me saying, Bruce, where's your permit? And him going, oh, it's maintenance. I'm supposed to be seasonally mowing this to maintain it in the habitat type that it's in. And he and I going around in circles about that. And then I remember speaking to, at the time, it was Jim Mahala before he retired. And he goes, Jeff, that's regular maintenance. So he should be doing it. So right now, and that was kind of always the perfect example of me of somewhere where I wish we would have had more oversight to what was happening. And I think this accomplishes that.
Thank you, Jeff. Seth?
Yeah, if I just may respond as well, I respect what the Land Council is saying, but I think that in my view, it's a positive rather than a negative for these large landowners to come in and have these permits in place so that we have standard operating protocols. I'm glad that the Land Bank's doing it. I'm glad that the DPW is doing it. I'd love to see the Conservation Foundation and Mass Audubon and trustees and the airport and everyone else who's a large landowner do the same thing, because I think Nantucket is a unique place where we have a lot of conservation land, and especially a significant amount of landowners who have non-contiguous parcels, coupled with the amount of wetlands and priority habitat we have. I think that having these kind of broader maintenance plans in place only better protects the interests rather than limits our ability to do anything about them.
Thank you, Seth. I have to agree. I think this is a step in the right direction because it does give us an idea of what's going on island-wide. And if we could get, the DPW's plan and some of the other large landowners, you get a really good picture of what's happening island-wide. And I think that could help with future planning, as we see maybe higher groundwater levels and coastal change. So, I think we still need to tweak it a little, but again, I think it's a positive development. Any other, Jeff?
Sorry, and I think these two permits, while they're kind of on a little bit of different tracks in places, I honestly think for large landowners, if our largest landowners are being responsible and are setting a really positive example for land management and techniques and reporting and things they should be doing, it honestly gives us the ability to put more pressure on private homeowners to also follow the rules and to be good, rule following citizens. And I think that anytime you can, as much as I hate to say it because we send them out all the time, you can show people the tome that the land bank has sent in for their maintenance activities to say, this is the standard that's set for maintaining properties and what's going on. You have to meet this or do better. And I don't see how it can be anything but helpful in the long run to be more open and transparent about what's happening.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Looks like no. Rachel, what would you like to do with this one? Would you like to continue to answer a few more of these questions?
Could I please continue, I believe, until January 28th? Was that when the DPW was on?
Yes, that is when the DPW is on. So this will be
perfect.
All right, great. So this will continue until January 28th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. So that moves us on in notices of intent to Weisenberger at 84 Pocomo Road, and this is represented by Art Gasparo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the second public hearing for the application for the installation of a sand drift fence along the toe of the coastal bank at the interface with the coastal beach. And there is, as we discussed at the first hearing, a extensive amount of sand drift fencing to each side of this property. And and the owner is looking to deter activity on the bank. We heard the concerns of the commission at the first hearing, and so I have submitted a revised plan where we've proposed the sturdy sand drift fence just for an extension of 15 feet into the property from to continue the abutters fencing, and that would be in the area. The fiber roll array stops about 10 feet from the property line and curves in at the end. So we're trying to avoid a finding where the commission feels that the assemblage of materials is a coastal engineering structure. And then the gap that would be left between the pieces of sturdy fence would be fenced with the more traditional wire supported snow fencing, though we've proposed that that would be fastened to 4x4 posts in such a manner to be as essentially well retained as possible, so that it hopefully doesn't get balled up by the tides in the way that some of the older snow fence that was supported by 2x2s did. So that's the changes that we've made and the extent of the proposal before you.
Thank you, Art. Any questions or comments from commissioners? I guess I'll go then. Art, I appreciate the changes. I know me personally, as someone who was sitting through the conversations on, coastal engineering structures and those assemblages of materials years ago, I really can't or don't see how I could permit this project at this location, because I do see the added fence as stepping this up to a coastal engineering structure, even if they are separated from each other. I think the whole idea behind having the core rolls is to have a natural system. So if you're adding fencing, you've kind of lost that natural system. And I think that if the fencing is there not to act as like bank stabilization, but just to prevent people and dogs from walking up on the bank, I think we need to try a lesser solution first. And I know that the homeowner wasn't happy to have no trespassing signage and things, but I think for the resource area, that would be the better option. The fencing, I think, just adds material that we shouldn't be allowing in front of a post 78 house. But I'm just one commissioner. But that is definitely my stance.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Was it clear though to you that it's the lesser fencing, it's just the snow fence, and you feel the same?
I do, yes.
Thank you.
Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've thought about this one for quite a long time, and I have decided that I also agree with Ashley's point. I think that the fencing, no matter what material it is, put in that zigzag pattern in front of the fiber roll array is going to start to build up sand and act as a coastal engineering structure. And I think that using the snow fencing, the lesser fencing, rather than the sand drift fencing across the whole site is an ingenious solution. But concerns were already expressed in the first hearing about that not being a really effectively a retainable material. Maybe it will be better with 4x4 posts. I don't know. I'm not the engineer here, but I wouldn't want anything put in that's just going to cause litter on the beach. So I would tend to say that let's first try maybe 2 posts and a chain, or 2 posts and a rope and a few signs, something that is going to be a visual barrier, probably not a physical barrier, but it'll at least indicate somehow to the public that this is private property. and then let's reevaluate from there if that's not working.
Thank you, Seth. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, do we, oh, Ian?
Sorry, Madam Chair, but looking at the Google aerials, I guess I see that Art is, trying to split the baby in half here, because there seem to the south, there are two houses that are obviously post 78, looking from the aerial, and the house to the north is post 78. And then there's Gamble's house, which was post 78. And they all have this sort of fencing. How did that come about? Do you know, Art or Jeff, or any?
They don't have the quar, Ian, so it's the combination of all the materials that make it coastal engineering, I believe. But Art looks like he has a response.
Yes, if I may, through you, Madam Chair, that is, those fences have permits. I did the permits to the south, and I believe that perhaps Mr. Santos might have done the permits to the north, but those are permitted sand drift fences.
Right. No, I understand that, Art, but I guess going forward, maybe we want to have less of them and go more with quar alone.
Jeff?
Yeah, so to add a little bit more clarity to that, we've typically allowed sand drift fencing, the zigzag kind of reinforced fencing there, not to be a coastal engineering structure. And we've done core logs by themselves to not be a coastal engineering structure. But every time we've had both of those together, the commission has found those to be coastal engineering structures, as long as they're together. If that makes sense. But the other ones that are there, just to be very clear, to the north and to the south, all of those with sand drift fencing are just sand drift fencing. There is not a core component or additional coastal stabilization component. It is singly the fencing. This lot is singly core logs right now, and not the fencing.
Thank you, Jeff. Seth?
I don't want to infer too much here or making assumptions, but I take it that if any of those abutters came in with a application to install coir installation behind their sand drift fencing, we'd probably say no. So I think that the issue is with, as Jeff said, having both. And Mr. Gasparo can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe in the last hearing, the possibility of having the applicant remove the coir and install the sand drift instead was raised, and that was not something they were interested in doing. So I think that I really appreciate the situation here, and I think it's a difficult issue to deal with as the homeowner, but we're at odds with what our regulations say. I think we need to try something different going about maintaining trespassing issues from a different perspective.
Thank you, Seth. Art?
Madam Chair, I'm hearing, what the commission is saying, and I know you've already had a long meeting and a long agenda, and certainly after you've invited public comment or any of the commissioners, I would just request a continuance, please, so I could discuss this with the owner.
Thank you, Art. Are there any other comments or questions to get out to Art from the commission? Dave? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to know how the other commissioners feel about what Seth had said for maybe some posts with some lines to help mark the area to relieve trespassing and people climbing on the bank.
Is there a perspective from commissioners on that? I guess for me, I'd have to know like how many posts we're talking about. I'm assuming they'd be 4x4 with like a rope running through. So I'd need a little more information on how much material would be added to the beach.
I mean, I could see a 4x4 every 8 feet with rope on the top and then a little signage as well, like we requested, and just see how it goes. Come back in a year and say it was successful or it wasn't. So
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Thank you, Joe. It looks like it's getting a thumbs up from Mark. Maureen has a comment and then Seth.
Yeah, a number of people have mentioned, let's see how something else would work and produce the same result that the homeowner is looking for. And that's what Joe just said. And Seth, I think it makes sense to have the homeowner think about something less, way less than a coastal engineering structure. And if this 2x4 and rope thing could work, then that would seem to, I think that should be tried before anything else. That would make sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Seth?
Thank you. I agree that we'll have to review any engineering schematic that comes in to make sure that it's not functioning as a coastal engineering structure and make a finding to that effect. But I strongly believe that there's some type of installation that could allow for pass-through of sediment and wind and all the other coastal processes that would simply act as a visual barrier and not accumulate materials.
Thank you, Seth.
So,
Ian?
yeah, so we're suggesting the rope and not going with the fiber coil rope, the coir rolls.
Well, they already have the coir rolls installed, so now they're just trying to prevent people from walking up the coir rolls and the stabilized bank.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If there's no more comments or questions from commissioners, we'll look to the public. Jeff, do we have any public comment on this one? Looks like no. So Art, would you like to continue until January 7th?
Yes, please.
Okay, perfect. So this will continue until January 7th.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that moves us on to 5 Sherburne Way LLC at 5 Sherburne Way, also represented by Art Gasparo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is the second public hearing for the residential redevelopment within the buffer zone to the coastal bank up on Sherburne Way. I provided a revised plan and letter. You'll note that I sort of truncated the overall plan to the area of concern to just try to help show a little bit of greater detail at a larger scale. But this is the property that does extend out to Nantucket Sound and is essentially a stable vegetated coastal bank. And the revisions that we made based on the input from the commission at the first hearing is to shift the proposed structure outside of the 50-foot buffer zone and the pool. I think the pool already was outside the 50, but there is a pool involved proposed, which is outside of that zone. The 25, 50, and 100-foot buffer zones are shown in red. And then I used red labels to go to the features which are being proposed. You'll see that there is over 1,000 square feet of structure, which is currently within the 50-foot buffer zone, which would be proposed. We are proposing a terrace within the 25 to 50-foot buffer zone, dry-laid bluestone patio, which would be further away, non-structural element, but also further away than the structure that currently exists. We have some minor grading proposed within that same zone. Again, maintaining a limit of work at the 25-foot buffer zone, and that's shown as the green line. And with that, I'd be happy to address questions or concerns that you. The one other thing, that I was added to the plan is that we would like to put a closed loop geothermal well system in between the, again, non-structural, the 25 and the 50 for HVAC purposes. And with that, I'd be happy to address questions or concerns that you may have.
Thank you, Art. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Ian?
So it's a pretty extensive patio, isn't it, Art?
Certainly.
It sort of seems to stretch across the lot entirely. How is it going to affect sort of drainage?
I would say I didn't do the exact, if I may, through you, Madam Chair, the exact calculations, but I don't think that it's going to be all that much different than the current conditions where you have over 1,100 square feet of impervious roof structure that's being taken out from that same zone, and there's currently no obvious erosion of the bank or impact of the air to the areas. So I don't think that it would negatively impact runoff or cause any harm.
Does that answer your question, Ian?
Well, I would prefer that. Well, I'm not sure that the previous dwelling, the fact that it had 1,100 square feet of roof within the area is germane, and I mean, I would prefer that there was more detail about, and for instance, we had an inch of rain yesterday. Where would it go if this was there now? I mean, it's a massive looking complex.
Yes, so I don't know. Art, do you have a response to that? And then Joe, I see you. I'll go to you next.
I would say that again, as long as we don't have runoff in such a way that you get concentrated flow that's going to cause erosion, and it's essentially shallow sheet flow, then it's just going to serve to recharge the coastal bank and the surrounding groundwater area. I mean, you've got a lot of very thick, heavy vegetation on this coastal bank, and I don't think that this amount of area is going to, result in an adverse effect from runoff to what is a stable bank.
Thank you, Art. Joe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Art, is the house being raised up? It looks like the topography says 62.9, and then, whoops, wrong one.
Yes.
Then there's a 65. So is that going to be like a whole retaining wall running along the property?
No. Well, perhaps outside of the 50 on the west side, there may be a little bit, but what we've done is to show that because I wanted to be clear with the commission, the first floor is the 66, the terrace would be the 65, and then the grade would be a 64 outside of the terrace. So it's just, essentially like a one step down from the terrace. And the lowest grade is at the northwest corner where you have elevation 62. You see the 62.9. So it would be about 2 feet higher with the terrace right there. But again, you have a step down, or the step down, I've rounded, it would be no greater than 10 inches. But you would go from, 65 to say 64.2, which is why then I showed the 64 contour there. So we have looked at that, and it is, and you'll also note that the rest of the lot falls off back, towards the south and towards the road as well. So, there's sort of a break point that would be through the spine of this structure, if you will. So it's not like all of this other water is going to go to the north. And I think that, to address your concerns, Could certainly accept a condition, that we could include outside of the buffer zone, or at least outside of the 50, some subsurface infiltration if needed.
Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair, one more time. I just would like to see a cross section through the lot, just to see. It seems like it's a little vague, the site plan. I think I need a little more detail.
We don't have, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Go.
We don't have fully developed, architectural plans at this point. They're being worked on. And again, we get sometimes a little bit back and forth between this board and the HDC. And so I felt that we needed to really come to the commission, and it's a good thing we did based on the last hearing. There had to be significant revisions. Again, I think that, typically this has sort of been a pretty big change, I think, the last couple of meetings where structures were often approved that replaced other structures that, were less in footprint than are there. And, we are taking over 1,100 square feet out and completely getting out of the 50-foot buffer zone, with that amount of area. So regardless, I think that that's a pretty large improvement there. And I just don't see that right now that, that house, there's no infiltration, there's no drainage that's there. And obviously from the ridge of that house going back, you can see all the grades. We've shown all the topography. I mean, out at the road, you're 13 feet lower. So, I mean, all of the water is going to, go at least from the sort of the midpoint of this house to the south. And so, like I say, I'm not really seeing that in this particular situation when I go back to the interests protected by the commission from runoff, that it's going to, cause an adverse impact.
Thank you, Art. I know Joe's had his hand up, and then I'll go to Seth.
All right. Thank you for taking the building out. I applaud that. I'm just having a visual problem trying to get my head around the patio. And I think that you will address Ian's concerns, and not to put words in Ian's mouth, but that's a concern of mine as well. And this is where I think if someone could just draw a quick little detail, or even if it's, you're not going to be heard until the 7th of next year. I think if we can have the architectural, just that north elevation, or maybe even the west elevation as well, I think that would be very telling to us. I know it would help me. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So Seth, and then Maureen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think given the condition of the coastal bank being heavily vegetated, if water is entering the ground, there should be no issue with those plants using that water. I think if there is any issue, it's with overland flow. So if the applicant is willing to look at some type of subsurface infiltration just to make sure it's going to the ground, that's great in my opinion. But I think that any groundwater in this area is going to be dealt with by the vegetation.
Thank you, Seth. Maureen?
Yes. My comment was just that this is trying to compare, the new and the old plans. That it's a very busy plan, and with showing both the existing and the new and the change new, from one to the other. So I think besides, I also was having, maybe for different reasons, really understanding exactly what was happening with that patio. So if there's a way to more clearly show it, I guess it's probably I'm just saying the same thing Joe did, but I was also having trouble given the the kind of complexity and busyness of the plan and kind of pulling out what's really different and what could have an impact. So some more clarity and presentation would be helpful for me.
Thank you, Maureen. Dave?
My sentiment exactly. Thank you, Madam Chair. First, Art, I want to. I think the removal of that is tremendous. You've changed. The changes are for the better. Some detail would help clear some things up for me also with the runoff and the drainage. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have any comments from the public on this one? No as well. So Art, what would you like to do here? Would you like to continue?
I think that would be a good idea, please.
Okay, would you like to continue until January 7th?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this will continue until January 7th. Thank you, Art.
Thanks.
And that moves us on to High Tide Partners LLC at 8 Ackermuck Way, Lot 1. And this is represented by Mark Ritz of Site Design. I don't think we have him here. So who is taking this one?
I am not going to take it, but let me just take 1 second. Hey, Joe. Madam Chair, I would just say for right now, we should just bump it to the end of the notices. And if Mark gets here, we'll take it up then. And if he doesn't, then we'll just continue until the 7th.
Perfect. So we'll push this one down the line and we will move on to Goldrich and Rice at 41 Crooked Lane, represented by Art Gasparo.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Again, this is the second public hearing on the application for residential development within the buffer zone to vegetated wetland. And I went back to the clients with concerns the commission had. And so the proposed garage studio structure that was within the driveway has been removed from the application that was within the 50-foot buffer zone. The modifications to the existing one-story structure have been removed. The infill of the outdoor shower, the freestanding outdoor shower has been removed, and the application now includes the removal of the existing 214 square foot garage, which has about 12 square feet within the 50-foot buffer zone, and in addition to the existing structure to replace that, which is slightly larger but remains outside of the 50-foot buffer zone. And that's shown in green on the plan, which I hope is clear, and be happy to address any outstanding concerns that you may have.
Thank you, Art. Are there questions or comments from commissioners? I know I appreciate the changes that were made, so thank you. If there are no questions or comments from commissioners, Jeff, do we have any comment from the public on this one?
Nope, and you have all of the required information you guys need.
Perfect. So Art, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion to close? Motion made by Mark. Is there a second? Seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal.
And thank you, Art, for making the changes. Aye.
Engelborg.
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding.
Aye, and thank you, Art.
Leclerc.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Art.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to 16 Western Preservation Trust LLC at 16 Western Ave, represented by Art Gasparo.
Thanks, Madam Chair. This is a first hearing on an application for work within the buffer zone to a coastal dune. And we are located out in Surfside, sort of between the parking lot and the hostel on the south side of the road. There is an existing structure and garage on this property. Shown in blue is the coastal dune boundary, and then shown in green is the proposed limit of work. Shown in red are the 25 and 50-foot buffer zones. The 100-foot buffer zone essentially is off the property or into the road, if you will. And the proposal is to remove the existing garage in its entirety, which is located out near the street, very close to the property line, and then to lift the existing house and make modifications and renovate that, put a foundation underneath it. There's a porch that wraps around 3 sides of the structure. So there'd be, we've replaced that porch. On the west side of the structure, you can see that I show there is a portion of that porch to be enclosed, though that is within the footprint of the existing structure. All of the work to the structure within the 50-foot buffer zone is within the footprint of structural elements which currently exist. This is a historic structure, so there are challenges and limitations that the architects have, and this is sort of what they've come up with. The addition or the replacement of the structure that would be removed again is it is slightly closer to the resource area, though it does remain outside of the 50-foot buffer zone. And then there's an existing deck at grade and a little boardwalk that accesses that. So we propose to replace that in kind. There is a far distance to the out to Surfside Beach and the ocean to the south, which you can see on the locust map in the lower corner of the drawing. So there's a good separation distance there, and we don't believe that there's really no change to the use of the property or impacts that we would see that would occur to the protected interest in the coastal dune. It might also be helpful if we could just in the presentation to also quickly look at the aerial that we submitted, which just does show the residential nature. There are essentially structures on both sides of this property, which are very close as well. So we're consistent with the overall area. And with that, I'd be happy to take questions or concerns. I would say, that any disturbance of vegetation between the existing structure and the dune would be replaced, in kind or native species in that area. I'm not looking to establish lawn area or anything like that going out south of the house.
Thank you, Art. Joe?
To kind of help Art on this one, I did see the architectural drawings today, and I think the architects did a phenomenal job of the plan is to restore this house. And I don't know if you guys have driven by there, but it's in really, really hard shape. And I think a part of history, Nantucket history, is going to be preserved. I think it's really good. As you can see, they're restricted by what they can do, but I think that, I don't have a problem with this application.
Thank you, Joe. I know, Art, I just had one question. The current house doesn't have a basement. Is that true?
That's correct.
So that's just one aspect that concerns me because of the position of the current house within the 50-foot buffer. I just don't know if I feel comfortable allowing adding a basement underneath, which would technically kind of be within that dune buffer. I might be alone in my perspective there, but that's the only thing I found somewhat concerning. I don't know if any other commissioners have comments or questions. Looks like no.
Well,
Ian?
I mean, it brings up what is new construction as opposed to what is sort of reinforcement for an existing building. It's clearly new construction. So.
Do you mean as far as adding the basement is concerned?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So,
Any other thoughts or comments, Joe?
I really don't see what would be the difference if you did a crawl space to a full foundation. I still think the house needs something and it needs to meet code. So I just don't, the disturbance is going to be there no matter what. So I don't have a problem going down an extra, 4 feet to be able to get a foundation underneath the property. And otherwise, I think they're going to have to go up more because they're going to have to get the mechanicals. They're going to have to get, a lot more room up above on the second floor or even the first floor. And I, if you saw this house, it really needs a lot of love and it's probably sitting on the ground. And if this person doesn't buy it, I know this is not concerned. It's probably going to be, someone's going to want a demo where this applicant wants to save the house, which I think is great. So something to consider.
Thank you, Joe. I live out this way, so I walk this stretch of houses quite frequently and know this house pretty well. So would like to see it preserved historically like this applicant wants. I just am slightly concerned with the basement. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For Art, if I may, on the plan, when it says that the house is going to be renovated with modifications, what are those modifications? Is it just the foundation or are there other elements being modified as well?
Yeah, there are other, modifications that are happening. I included the architectural plans, so that you can see there's a connector piece to the addition that's happening. The modification I was trying to address is the fact that on the west side of the house, that porch is being enclosed. I wanted to be sure that it was put, properly portrayed to the commission that it's not the exact same, same house, but that there were, that it wasn't just being renovated in kind, but there in fact are, changes, all, I think with the goal of, maintaining that historical character and being able to for them to, also get through VHTC. And if I could, Madam Chair, through you, also address the concerns to the basement. Our limit of work, Ms. Topham said it, I think, very well, is essentially we can't, you can't come in 2020 and try to fix a structure like this and not have some sort of support, right? It's got to be, it's got to be on something. And, the other alternatives are, a crawl space, which still is going to require, the footings have to be by code at least 4 feet down so that they're below the frost line. So we would be proposing that. In this case, going the extra, 4 or 5 feet in an area where we're not in close proximity to groundwater. And if we've got to put some shoring around the outside of this to maintain the limits of work, that's what would be done. And that, that's going to be the same limit of work that you approve, regardless of which type of a basement that we put in order to be at code.
Thank you, Art. I appreciate that description. Ian, did you just have your hand up?
yes, thank you, Art, and thank you, Joseph. I think, they've made it clear why it's acceptable.
Any other comments or questions from Commission? Oh, Mark.
Art, just so I'm clear, I think I understand your drawing, but the foundation will only come, well, I should say, it will not be underneath the porch and the existing porch. That will just have 4x4s or sonotube and then a porch above, I assume.
No, the foundation is proposed to go under the porch as well, which is shown. That's why we included the architecturals and the foundation plan with the drawing as well. So they would put the full foundation under the entire thing.
Mark,
That's a pretty, I do think that's a pretty big change, Art, isn't it?
It's within the structural footprint, but I do see your point.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like, oh, Mark?
Art, again, for clarity, wouldn't that new foundation be within the 50-foot and require a waiver?
It is within the, most of the structure is within the 50-foot buffer zone. And again, within the footprint of, that's why we didn't, it's a structural element within the structural element. So I guess the question is, your point would be, does a new foundation within a structure, the footprint, require a separate waiver? I don't think that it would, but
I misspoke, Art. Isn't a portion of it within the 25?
yes, it is.
Thank you, Art and Mark. Jeff, do you have any perspective on that? Maybe needing a waiver because it's new foundation that wasn't currently there?
Thinking about how we've treated, kind of structure for structure in the past, structure for structure has been kind of an even swap. I definitely see everyone's point. And I think it's worth discussing, to some degree, or if anyone else wants to comment on it. We haven't always required that in the past if it's changing. I think we've always, for better or for worse, whatever the structural footprint is on the ground, is the structural footprint on the ground, regardless of, foundation or first floor or deck or whatever the structure is. But I think in any of these cases, it's worth at least the talk.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners? Mark?
Just through the chair, Art, what's underneath the porch now?
Probably some like cobblestone, cinder block type supports. I mean, it's old.
Thank you, Art. So if that's all from commissioners, we'll see if there's any public comment on this one. Jeff?
All right, so I'll kind of combine here because they're from the same, but they're split. So RJ Turcotte from the Nantucket Land Council asked the question, since this foundation is being rebuilt within 50 feet of a coastal dune, is it possible for the house to be built on pilings to allow dune and associated sediment to migrate as it would naturally? And then he continues by asking, why does foundation need to extend underneath the porch? And then Burton Balkand wrote, he just asked if there was a sewer hookup that this property could use on Western Ave.
No.
Thank you. All right, so no sewer hookup. Ian, do you have a question?
Well, I do, Madam Chair, because I didn't realize that the foundation was going to be expanded to include the porch. So I am not in favor of expanding it any more than the footprint of the existing main building. So I see no reason to have a full basement foundation to support the porch. Am I missing something here? I seems to be the evening that I seem to be missing quite a bit. I apologize to my fellow commissioners.
No, Ian, I agree with you. That seems like they're kind of expanding the structural footprint underground in some ways by putting it under the porch. Mark had his hand up and then Joe.
I just, that's where I come down to, Ian. To me, it's sort of an expansion, sort of, but it's in the 25 and 50, and I think that's probably pushing the envelope a little bit.
Thank you, Mark. Joe?
Yeah, so just reduce the foundation to underneath habitable space. I think would be wise.
Yes, I know that would make me more comfortable. Dave had his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I agree with that. My feeling is a bit of a hardship with within the 25 of that. I think that's, like Mark had said, that's kind of pushing it.
Thank you, Dave. So Art, what would you like to do with this one?
I think I'd like to take it back and discuss the commission's concerns with the client and continue to the 7th, please.
Okay, perfect. So this will continue until January 7th.
Thank you.
Thank you, Art. That moves us on to 14 North Road LLC at 14 North Road, and this is represented by Brian Madden and Ryan Maxwell.
Thank you very much. Brian Madden from LEC Environmental Consultants, representing the applicant. So based from comments received at the last meeting, the architects were able to slide the structures further to the south to ensure that all the structural foundation work is outside the 50-foot buffer zone to the top of the coastal bank. And that leaves the cumulative relocation from existing structure being 9 feet from the top of the bank to outside the 50-foot. There's a net reduction of 2,291 square feet within the 50-foot buffer zone. And we're also proposing the 1,225 square foot revegetation area within the 25-foot buffer zone to replace lawn. And there is also a proposed dry well on this one north of the developed areas that will collect runoff from the patio areas, and everything else slopes from the house to the south away from the top of the bank. But there's also a dry well down in that location as well. And as revised, we believe that the project meets the net benefit standard, and I'll turn it over to questions at this point.
Thank you, Brian. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The 6 proposed support posts, I'm just a little bit confused as to what their purpose is. I'm assuming that the ones to the east are to support the pergola, but I can't understand from the plan what the ones to the west are for. So if you could just clarify.
Yep. Yeah, so the ones on that central patio are for the pergola structure. The 2 on the west side are for that 2nd-story deck that has remained the same since the original submission.
Seth?
And if I just may follow up to that, has there been any look at cantilevering that deck and also incorporating the pergola into a type of roof structure connected to the house rather than having those support posts?
I don't know the specific structural answer to that, but at the end of the day, it's 2 posts, 2 square feet on the ground. The structure is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like 9 by 15, somewhere around there. I'm not quite sure if structurally it can be cantilevered or what sort of structural support it would need beyond that. But at the end of the day, it's the 2 square foot posts being a very de minimis coverage within that area.
Thank you, Brian. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have comments from the public on this one?
We do not, but before you ask, we do have all of the required information for this application.
So commissioners, I'll give you one last chance if you have questions. Which again looks like no. So Brian, would you like to close?
We would, please.
Okay, is there a motion to close?
Close.
Motion made by Joe. Is there a second? Seconded by Ian. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips. Oh, you're muted.
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to Norton at 24 North Cambridge Street, also represented by Brian Madden and Ryan Maxwell.
Thank you very much. For the
Could I
record,
again, I need to make a disclosure here that I am a direct abutter, and the owners are immediate family members, just to let you know.
Thank you, Terry.
okay, thank you. Brian Madden from LEC Environmental Consultants. The last time we were before you was before Thanksgiving. And based on some commissioner feedback we received at that meeting, thanks, Joe, if you don't mind zooming in on that corner section. Thank you. So based off of those last comments from the commissioners, we are proposing to remove the portion of the deck that was unpermitted that ultimately extended into the 50-foot buffer zone. That will be removed, and the pool fence will be entirely located outside the 50-foot buffer zone. And even without the proposed revegetation area, the project does provide greater than 50% natural vegetated areas between the 25 and 50-foot buffer zone. And so I believe that addresses the commission's concerns and requests from the last meeting, and I'll be happy to answer any questions on this one.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have any comments from the public on this one?
No, you do not.
Do we have everything we'd need to close?
Yes.
All right. Brian, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion to close?
Motion to close.
Motion made by Joe. Is there a second? Seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye, and we'll be reading the minutes extra carefully, Terry.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to Mary Jo Buckland at 113 Hummock Pond Road, also represented by Brian Madden, excuse me.
Thank you very much. So this application was initially submitted a little ways back for a septic upgrade that involves upgrading the septic with an IA component, and there's pressure dosing through preliminary review and variance requests from the Board of Health. The system has been designed to meet that 5-foot separation to high groundwater as required. The septic field is located within the 100-foot buffer zone. The entire lot is within the 100-foot buffer zone to BVW within the northern portion of the lot. But the septic upgrade represents an improvement over existing condition. When the application was filed, commission staff notified the applicant that there had been an outstanding 2017 enforcement order that had been issued. And I think back then there was some discussions, and I think the owners thought that it had been resolved, but after we started to peel back the layers, it was not. And so what we're proposing to do is address some restoration elements as part of the project. If you remember this property previously, a lot of artwork and debris along the roadway that was relatively evident. That continued north of the dwelling into the inner buffer zone and into the bordering vegetated wetland. This property was initially approved for development in '97, and work started soon thereafter. It had a different wetland boundary. This wetland boundary was updated last winter. So that did creep up a little bit more landward. But as part of the, when the property owners acquired the property and there was all the debris in the back, they undertook a significant cleanup effort. And unbeknownst to them, and without the benefit of a permit, started cleaning up some of that work, some of that area that had been degraded. And some of that activity did extend into what is now bordering vegetated wetlands that had been reestablished as lawn area. And so I had submitted a restoration plan. The stippled area on the plan shows the restoration area. And Joe, yeah, thank you. So we developed through consultation with the staff a restoration planting plan to restore portions of the BVW that are currently occupied by lawn in the inner buffer zone. And so we're proposing a variety of native shrubs within the wetland, from winterberry, highbush blueberry, sweet pepper bush. There's also plugs of Joe Pye weed and rose mallow proposed within that area. Within the buffer zone, we are proposing to plant bayberry, northern arrowwood, and inkberry, along with switchgrass and butterfly weed plugs. So really to restore it, an improvement over existing conditions and pre-existing conditions too. And you can see that the well on this particular plan is now in the wetland, but basically that was where the old wetland boundary was, along that edge. So you can see how much that's kind of crept up. And Joe, if you don't mind just toggling back to the prior plan. Thank you. Perfect. And in order to bring a few other elements into compliance that we noted, just give it a second. So there was a little expansion of the driveway into the 25-foot buffer zone. We're proposing to remove that area that's cross-hatched, and a small portion of the stone patio did extend into the 25-foot buffer zone. We are proposing to relocate that outside the 25-foot buffer zone. And I also just wanted to touch upon the pergola that's east of the house. So that was my understanding, a pre-existing platform of some nature that when the property owners purchased the property, repurposed it, and added a pergola to it. So that structure had been pre-existing, and back when it was installed, it was well outside the 50-foot buffer zone. But we just wanted to make the commission aware of that. I guess overall, the proposed restoration efforts, the septic upgrade, will provide a long-term net benefit to existing conditions. And with that, I'll turn it over to questions.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Maureen?
Yes. Oh, sorry.
No, you muted yourself.
If it said muted, or unmuted as opposed to unmute and mute, I could do this anyway. So the little port now, wait, I need to go back to the thing. Sorry. The where there's that little porch and then there's it's a patio that's being moved out. What is it? Reconfigured.
Yeah, outside the 25.
Right. Oh, wait a minute. So maybe, I guess I was looking at the wrong plan. Is that patio now all going away? It's being totally removed?
Only the portion within the 25-foot buffer zone. That's being taken out of the 25 and just being added to the side of it. Outside.
Oh, okay, because that's something, I guess I was wondering why. I mean, given the fact this is a kind of an unfortunate lot, and obviously there's not a lot of choice about what to do. I personally would like to see as little as possible within the 50 there, and to redo that patio. I mean, I would think it would make more sense just to get rid of that. I mean, it is this wetland, if anything, is I don't think it's going in the wrong direction, if you will, for the house to keep structural things, excuse me, on that side of it. So I would think it would make more sense to just leave the porch. I mean, I don't know how that must be necessary, or an entrance exit to the house, but I would think that would make sense to get rid of that, if at all possible. So that's the comment I wanted to make. And it's just unfortunate that they decided to take whatever existing foundation or whatever it was for that and put up the pergola. I know it's within the 100, but it, again, this is all so close to everything. And I would say that's an unfortunate addition, which I wish wasn't there, but that's not, I don't think that's anything we can say anything about officially. So I want to make those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Brian, do you have a reply?
Yeah, thank you. Just relative to the patio, we did submit some photographs. It is a relatively small footprint to begin with. And I look at it this way, that, a patio replacing lawn is not a negative. It takes away additional areas that otherwise would be, fertilized or irrigated in some capacity, and more defines use areas and deters away from, expansion towards the wetland. And as I went through that, and it popped into my head now is we didn't specifically call out any permanent markers along the restoration limits, but would fully anticipate typical conditions for that, to ensure that future encroachment doesn't happen, but also to define the limits of the domestic activity.
Thank you, Brian.
I just want to
Maureen?
for a second. And is that patio going to be a dry laid patio? Is that the plan?
Correct. Yeah, dry laid patio. The topography coming out of the house north is very flat, so it's not a scenario where there'd be sheet flow or anything like that.
Thanks for that clarification, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to get a couple points out for clarity from our end, and kind of where the enforcement started, and kind of where some of those things happened. And just for clarity purposes first, the original filing for the house long ago, that porch was originally constructed in compliance and outside of the 50-foot buffer zone as that wetland was delineated at the time. So while I agree it's unfortunate that it's in, this is one of those sites that when we started including soils information in kind of the early 2000s, that wetland line crept out after the house had been constructed. And to go through a little bit of history for a second, and I promise I'll try to be brief. This was the lot that was formerly occupied by Matt Oates, and I think everyone's probably seen his art around town. And he was using it for a great deal of storage. And when the property changed hands, a lot of the materials that he had gathered to use for some of his art installations was in the backyard and stacked in the bushes and had become overgrown. It was a problem. We originally had talked to the owner at that point about cleaning some of that up as it got closer to their septic having to be replaced and removing it. The property changed hands. The message kind of got to the new homeowners, that they were looking to remove, frankly, what was a lot of debris that was in the buffer zone. And the message didn't get from us through the previous owners to the new owners very clearly, and some confusion. They removed it. That's how we kind of got to where we are today. I will say the amount of debris was pretty extreme as far as stuff went. I mean, there was a lot in there. So I think overall, at the end of the day, there's an opportunity to bring the site back into a better level of compliance and provide a real benefit to having the debris out into probably a healthier wetland system than what's been there for the last 20 years. But hopefully that's a little clarity for everyone on kind of the history of what went on.
Yeah. Thank you for that history, Jeff. This site, I must admit, bums me out because about a year and a half ago, I think they really started clearing it. And I drive past this site quite frequently. And I thought, it seems like they're close to a wetland, and it just didn't trigger my instinct to report it to Jeff. And then, of course, they were clearing without a permit. So I'm happy to see them coming in with a notice to fix that. And I'm also happy, Brian, you're going to add markers, because I was going to ask you to do that. My other question, and I feel like stupid for not knowing this, can this site connect to town water and sewer? I know water goes out that far.
I don't believe sewer, not currently.
Okay.
They have been before for variances, but the final design hasn't been approved by Board of Health yet.
Okay, thank you. Jeff?
I think I can probably definitively answer both of those. Sewer is not extended in that area. The sewer that was going through that we had talked about for the Nantucket and plus parcels and the Shimo and plus parcels kind of terminates in the New Hummock Circle, Somerset area. So it's a little bit further up the road. Town water, though, and if you look at the plan real carefully and you can just see it, it's right by the existing driveway. Town water does run through the road past there. So I believe they would have the opportunity, if needed, to tie into town water.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Because now that the well is within the wetland, that might be something worth considering.
That well, to be fair, may be used for irrigation only. It may not be used for the drinking water or water within the dwelling.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you, Jeff. Joe?
So my memory as a child going by this property, I believe the property adjacent to it, there were cars, dishwashers. So I'm sure they found a lot of debris on that lot. Some might be Matt's, but I think some he had inherited. So I'm glad that we've noticed this and we're cleaning it up and taking care of it.
Yeah, the clients gave me a full list of what they cleaned out, and it was they listed over 100 items.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole area used to be a bit of a junkyard. So
yeah, we used to call them neat and tidies.
Ian, you had your hand up.
Well, Joseph, you absolutely hit that one out of the park. And it just happens to be the corner that I was driving around in my rattly old Willis station wagon in the summer of 1964 with my girlfriend at the time, when I first heard House of the Rising Sun by the Animals, which I'll always remember. Anyway, thank you.
Boy, a little history lesson into Ian's life.
Thanks for sharing, Ian.
Any other thoughts or comments on this one from commissioners? Jeff, do we have any comments from the public? All right, so Brian, what would you like to do with this one? Would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion to close?
So
Motion
moved.
made by Seth, seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Popham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much.
And we're actually going to go back in the agenda to High Tide Partners LLC at 8 Ackermuck Way, Lot 1, which is represented by Mark Ritz.
Good evening. I apologize for missing my earlier time slot. Today's snowstorm scrambled my brain completely. What you have before you this evening is an application for Lot 1, 8 Ackermuck. Several months ago, we did an RDA on the property to confirm the extent of the wetland and buffer zones. And today we have application for a house, a pool house, retaining wall, associated landscaping and grading. All structural components are outside of the 50-foot buffer zone. We are proposing a low 2 to 3 foot high retaining wall just outside the 50-foot buffer zone, with some landscaping down to the limit of work line, which is shown by the orange silt fence line. We are preserving 50% of the native vegetation between the 25-foot and 50-foot buffer zone, as that's depicted by, again, the orange silt fence line. The house is approximately 50% inside the 100-foot buffer zone. The pool is about a third inside the 100-foot buffer zone. All structural components are outside of the 50. We are proposing, we're not actually doing any filling on this site. We're actually, there's a bit of a hill right where the house is going, and we're actually taking the grade down a bit. So we're not doing much filling. We're just putting in the retaining wall to sort of stabilize the slope. And most of the work that's being done here is actually removal of material to bring the grade down a bit. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Can't see if there are questions with the plan up, but I'll ask if there are any questions from commissioners. Ian, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Madam Commissioner. So I'm very uneasy with the sort of this 50% rule, and I'd like to see a detailed schematic of what this actually entails, please. Or drawings of what this actually entails. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Is that something you think you could provide?
Could I have a little bit of clarification on exactly what you're looking for in terms of a schematic? I mean,
yeah. I'd like to see what you're removing and, you know, what you're proposing to put in its place. In terms of description of the plants to be removed, we can do that. We're proposing to put lawn in its place, but we can certainly provide a description of what we're proposing to remove. Thank you, Mark.
Beyond that, I mean, this is a fairly standard, you know, the 50% rule. To my knowledge, you know, unless there have been changes recently, it's been fairly standard practice to be permitted to remove, you know, vegetation up to 50%.
No, I understand, Mark, and I'm very uncomfortable with it, and I hope we change our local regulations going forward to make it much more stringent. But that's a separate issue. So it does, my question does reflect my uneasiness at removing that much vegetation for, that close to the wetland.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, and I think what we've been trying to do, Mark, lately, without updating our regs, just keep a little bit better of a hold on what that 50% means and kind of memorializing, if you're taking 50% now, that's the only disturbance that can be done in that area. So the better idea we have of that to put on the plans, then again, it's kind of memorialized moving forward. And I think in some of these cases, if there's important, trees and things that might be between the 25 and 50, we'd like maybe those to be avoided if possible, when we're making this balance. I also think on this site, it would be a good place to have demarcation once you do establish that lawn, so that we're not encroaching into, the 50% that's preserved.
We can certainly put demarcation, posts or something like that, or split rail, depending what their preference is. Just to let you know, we actually survey located every single tree within proposed work area on this particular site, and they're shown on the plan. And there's only one tree that we're proposing to remove. I do not at the moment recall what species that is, but there's only one tree that's inside that 25 to 50, between the within our limit of work, inside the 50-foot buffer, that I'm not even sure if that one is going to be removed or not. I can double check on that. But that's the only tree. Everything else is the usual stuff that grows. We have a fairly significant slope here, so even though we're in the wetland buffer zone, the wetland is down around elevation 13, 14, and we're starting our clearing around 21, 22. So we're not talking about very wet species, because they're 7-8 feet above high groundwater. So I can certainly provide information on what we're proposing to remove for the next meeting.
Thank you, Mark. That would be awesome. Joe?
Through the chair. Mark, it seems like there's going to be a lot of regrading here. Can we get an updated topography plan? Because it seems like, yeah, but just if we can have one. Thanks.
Yeah, we can certainly provide that. And yeah, like I said, we're mainly bringing things down. There's a bit of a ridge that runs across the middle of the property, and we're actually taking out a retaining wall and bringing some of that grade down. We can provide a grading plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that seeing a little bit more detail is always good. And I think that we can also include our standard condition that no trees over 4 inches DBH can be cut. I think we have ways to ensure that we're not losing trees that are providing benefit. I do have one other comment that isn't related to the project overview, but it's related to a technical concern. It's that on the project description, which is page 11 of 22 out of this submission, in the introduction, I believe that the map location is incorrectly listed. It says 80 Millbrook Road, map 40, lot 79.1. I don't think that's.
I may have left a typo in there, but the plan references the correct map and lot. It's a portion of 41 parcel 618.
Yeah,
so I apologize.
No worry. I do see on the WPA Form 3 notice of intent, it has the right one, but just I didn't know if that was an issue that we had to deal with at all.
Thank you, Seth. You're always really great at picking up on that detail, and I so appreciate it.
Just
Jeff?
to correct that, as long as the notice of intent form, the WPA form is correct, because we don't have a legal worry about that. My guess it was probably just a cut and paste there, or I reused a template that I use there. So I do it too.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other? Oh, Mark?
Yes, through the chair. Mark, is there a irrigation plan for the new lawn?
No irrigation proposed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Ian?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Through building on Mark's comment, Mark Beal's comment, and as Mark Ritz has observed how steep the slope is, perhaps we should in fact detail that no irrigation at all.
Yes, thank you, Ian. I think certainly within the 50, that should be easy enough for us to do, and probably anywhere that it's sloped to go towards the wetland. Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners? Not, we'll look to see if there's public comment on this one. Looks like we do not have public comment on this one. So Mark, would you like to continue to get some of these questions answered?
Yes, we'd like to continue to the next meeting. I believe we're also waiting for a file number, so we'll provide additional information and hopefully have everything next meeting.
Okay, perfect. So our next meeting is January 7th, and we'll continue till then.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
luck with the snow, Mark.
Thank you.
Yes, good luck. And that moves us on to minor modifications. We have the Nantucket Electric Company at 1 Candle Street, and I believe we have Melissa Kaplan from BSC Group representing this.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Melissa Kaplan from BSC Group representing Nantucket Electric. I forget how long ago it was. It was back in August. We came to you for some underground conduit installation as well as the switchgear platform, which was order of conditions was issued. However, since that time, we Nantucket Electric needed to just make a couple little changes with the underground conduit. We had originally proposed, let's see, we had originally proposed 4 existing manholes were proposed for enlargement. 6 new manholes were proposed to be installed. And with this change, they're adding 1 more to be enlarged and 1 new manhole. And then a portion of the underground conduit that we previously proposed along Washington Street will instead be installed along Coffin Street. No impacts to new resource areas are proposed. The new route is entirely within the road and bordering land subject to flooding, just as before. It's just a little slight relocation of the work. So we added there's a yellow manhole right next to the word Candle Street to the right of Candle Street there, which it probably should have been there because they kind of come together in a 4-way. That's a 4-way manhole there, which I think just got left off. And then the one down here on South Water Street, we're enlarging one down there as well. I think that orange one between the blue and the red line there, I think it's a change. And then this along Coffin Street, which I know you can't see my cursor, but leading to P4 is a relocation there. So that's basically all that's changed. You're on mute, Ashley.
Now I muted myself. Thank you, Melissa. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Ian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is an indirect question, but since it's all within a floodplain, how do you make it waterproof so that people don't get electrocuted? I mean, you know.
It's under the ground. It's completely under the road.
And
it's in a
so,
concrete duct bank. It's in a conduit. The electrical wires are in a conduit, and then they're in a concrete duct bank, and then the road is on top of it.
And so where it's spliced, it's what, waterproofed, or?
The manholes, will be waterproof to the best of the ability. But yeah, if there's a huge flood here, the manholes will get a little water in it, but they're so protected. So
I can wade around there secure in the knowledge that I won't glow like a Christmas tree. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes,
Okay.
you will not get electrocuted.
All right, thank you.
Unless you're going like down in the manhole, which you shouldn't be doing anyways. But
thank you.
We don't want to tempt Ian to explore down there.
No, I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, I'm pretty sure you'll be fine, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Seth, you have your hand up.
I don't really know anything about this, so this is very much non-expert opinion, but I assume that if you can run undersea cables across 30 miles of ocean, you can run electrical cables under a street, and they can be waterproof as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. I don't imagine the public would have anything on this. Jeff, do we have everything we need to issue the minor mod? We do. All right. Is there a motion to issue? Looks like Joe's making the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Dave. By roll vote, Beal?
Aye.
Engelborg?
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding?
Aye.
LaFleur?
Aye.
Phillips?
Aye.
Topham?
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. You have a good night. Hopefully it won't be too long.
I hope you have a good night as well.
Good night.
So that moves us on to certificates of compliance. We have BFP Properties LP at 13 Easton Street, represented by Art Gasparo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was an application that had originally been filed by attorneys, and then we came in and did some additional plan work. We do believe that the work has been completed in substantial compliance with the issued order of conditions. You can see in the northern part of the property, there are 2 granite steps that are shown. And we did a little extra study to just be sure that, there wasn't really fill brought in. It was more of, I think, a leveling of the area. And those are like 5-inch, really pretty small type steps, and the area is no higher than the abutting properties. So I think that was one of the questions why this had been continued. Ultimately, the project was not one of the projects I had permitted, but that was for an expansion of the structure and some other renovation and changes to the site. But I believe it is in substantial compliance.
Thank you, Art. Are there any questions from commissioners? It's like, no. Jeff, has staff been out to review this one?
Yes, we would agree that it's in substantial compliance.
Are there any ongoing conditions with this one?
I don't believe so.
So if there are no questions, is there a motion to issue the certificate of compliance? Looks like motion made by Maureen. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal?
Aye.
Engelborg?
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding?
Aye.
LaFleur?
Aye.
Phillips?
Aye.
Topham?
Aye.
That carries unanimously. You are.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to Camadif LLC at 32 Dukes Road, and this is represented by staff. Oh, or is Jeff, are you on for this one, Blackwell?
Yes, I am. Good
Perfect.
evening. This property came before you a couple of meetings ago where we filed a request for an amended order to take care of a wall that was built in the buffer zone. And the amended order was granted and the appeal period has run out. So we're applying now for the certificate of compliance. That's all there is.
Muted again. Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners about this one? Looks like no. Jeff Carlson, has staff been out to review?
Yes, and we would agree that it is now in substantial compliance after the amended order, but we would also recommend carrying forward conditions 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23 that are all related to the operation and maintenance of the pool.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a motion to issue the certificate with ongoing conditions 19 through 23 that relate to the pool? Motion made by Ian. Is there a second? Seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrison, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You too. Jeff Carlson, should the next three be taken together or are they taken separately?
I would say that the first two can be done together, and then the third one should be done separately.
Okay. So we have Clarkford Partners Nominee Trust at 17 Kimball Avenue, and we'll hear SE 48 1870 and SE 48 2917 together.
Okay, thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors. The first certificate of compliance request is SE 48 1870, and this one actually predated our involvement in the project, but it was strictly a landscaping work that was done on the property, I believe back in late 90s, actually. And that work, actually 2005 is when that was done. The next one, SE 48 2917, was the construction of a full foundation under the existing dwelling, renovations to the existing structure, associated grading and landscaping. All of this work was within the buffer zone to a coastal bank with the property located at 17 Kimball Avenue. Both of those orders, the work has been complete in substantial compliance, and we've submitted as-built and photos to accompany the requests.
Thank you, Paul. Is there any questions from commissioners? Jeff, has staff been able to check on these first two?
Yes, and we would agree that they're in substantial compliance.
No ongoing conditions?
None for this one. That's why we did these separate. So the next one will have a number of them. So.
Great. So is there a motion to issue the certificates for SE 48 1870 and SE 48 2917 with no ongoing conditions? Looks like motion made by Seth, seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And that moves us on to Clarkford Partners Nominee Trust at 17 Kimball Avenue, SE 483154, also represented by Paul Santos.
Before Paul starts talking, the reason I broke this one out separately, Madam Chair, is there's going to be a whole number of ongoing conditions as part of our recommendation, and I just didn't want to make it too confusing.
I think that's great. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors, representing the applicant for a project at 17 Kimball Avenue. This was a construction and maintenance of sand drift fencing on a coastal beach, land subject to coastal storm flowage within their respective buffer zones and the buffer zone to a coastal dune and coastal bank. You have submitted with the request some internal inspection reports that were completed on the project. You have a series of site photos that are present and also go back a few years. And you have reporting information that was provided to NHESP, which was part of their requirements for start of construction, completion of construction, and so forth. So all of that is in the packet. There was an extensive list of conditions attached to the order of conditions, and I think that's what Jeff was making reference to with conditioning, ongoing conditions. But the work itself has been completed in substantial compliance with the original order, and we are asking for a certificate of compliance, and happy to answer any questions that you may have. This again, 17 Kimball Avenue. This was one of 2 or 3 properties that we actually permitted sand drift fencing in this area back about 2-3 years ago.
Thank you.
So any questions, happy to answer.
Are there any questions from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, has staff been out to review this portion of the project?
Yeah, and we would agree that it's in substantial compliance, and they did a nice job. For just a second of history, this is one of the ones that Heritage first started issuing, that like the posts have to get cut at 45-degree angles, and they brought in a whole new like range of conditions on sand drift fencing, kind of unannounced. And I think this was like the first or second project that hit on. So that led to a number of other conditions from us, and that's kind of what we're recommending. And I'll spare everyone the reading them. If people want them, I'm happy to send them. But we're recommending that it get issued with essentially conditions 8 through 21 ongoing. And they're all related to, reporting after storms, photo monitoring, marking structural materials, responsibility for retrieving materials that get free, monitoring reports, monitoring if the structure is removed, contact information for everyone involved with the project, traveling on the beach between April 1st and September 15th, nothing stored on the beach, staking high water line if work is going to be done, some of the survey requirements, requirement to bring the structure back into compliance within 21 days, and then if any other debris uncovers to be removed. So that is the 60-second summary of all of those conditions, but that's essentially what they're for.
Jeff, is there a motion to issue the certificate with conditions 8 through 21 ongoing?
So moved.
Motion made by Maureen. Is there a second? Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And that moves us on to Jason W. Maroney at 29 Rhode Island Avenue, also represented by Paul Santos.
Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors, representing Jason Maroney, property owner at 29 Rhode Island Avenue. This was an order of conditions that permitted the construction of an addition to an existing structure with associated grading, landscaping, and utilities within land subject to coastal storm flowage. There was a coastal dune component adjacent to the project, but the work occurred outside the 100-foot setback to that resource area. Work has been completed in accordance with the order. As-built have been provided, and we are seeking a certificate of compliance for the work.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions from commissioners? No. Jeff, has staff been out to review this one?
Yes, and we don't have any ongoing conditions for this one as well.
Perfect.
Move for approval.
Great. So motion made by Mark, seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding. May have stepped away temporarily. LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, so that carries with Commissioner Golding stepping out for the minute.
Eating dessert.
Yeah. And that moves us on to Patrick S. Keating at 49 Red Barn Road, represented by Paul Santos.
Thank you again. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors, representing the property owner, Patrick Keating, at 49 Red Barn Road. This was an order of conditions that was issued for the relocation of an existing dwelling away from an eroding coastal bank with associated grading, landscaping, and utilities. It was also in the buffer zone to a coastal dune. Many of you, I think, maybe know this property. It's out in Nantucket at the end of Red Barn Road. And we were actually able to obtain zoning board of appeals variances for this property, which allowed us to get as far away from the eroding bank as we could and keep the building on the property. The ZBA was kind enough to issue zoning setback variances, which allowed us to get as close as we could to the Nantucket Conservation Foundation land. The building has been moved, placed on a new foundation. We had, prior to the move, upgraded to a new septic system. That septic system was able to be utilized, and that's still in place. And the work has been done in substantial compliance, and we're seeking a certificate of compliance from the commission.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions from commissioners? No. Jeff, has staff been out to review this one?
Yes, and we would agree that it's in substantial compliance and don't have any ongoing conditions to recommend.
Is there a motion to issue the certificate? Motion made by Seth, seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much. And Ian, I had to do some quick math on you driving in 1964 story, by the way.
Good luck with that one, Paul.
If you were licensed at that time, or you were just out driving. So.
No, I had a license.
Okay. All right, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Paul.
Good night, Paul.
All right, so that moves us on to orders of conditions. Jeff sent these out earlier. And I believe we'll be starting with Goldrich and Rice. If I'm correct.
Yes. So this was the project. This was Art Gasparo's project on Crooked that came back with the pretty significant revisions. And it had the removal of the structure and the addition outside of 50 feet. So the only condition that I had kind of included on there was that all of the construction material and debris are to be stored outside of the 50-foot setback.
Are there any additions by commissioners, or are we still reading this over? Is there a motion to issue as drafted?
Also move.
Is there a second? Seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody. And that moves us on to 14 North Road, LLC at 14 North Road.
All right, I'll step through a couple of parts of this one because it's a little different. I got some kind of updated information on DEP that they clarified that one of the regulations requires us to put this in, and it wasn't super clear. So if you look at the findings for findings number 4 and findings number 5, relate to the fact that since this is new construction within 100 feet of the coastal bank, that it's 2 findings that specifically memorialize that the structure is not eligible for essentially a coastal engineering structure in the future. The one condition is under the one finding is under the state, and the other one is under the local. So I separated those out. So expect to see those going forward, very clearly listed on any coastal bank new construction project. That those are now required to be clearly listed. With that, a couple more. Just have kind of our regular suite of pool conditions, and then a number 19 for some yearly photographs of the restoration area that they were showing on that lot.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions for Jeff on this one or any amendments? Give you guys all a minute to read through it. But once you're done, if there's a motion to approve. Dave,
Motion to approve.
is there a second? Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to Richard and Valerie Norton at 24 Cambridge Street.
Sorry, 1 second. So this one again was able to add back in. It wasn't even an original order, so it's almost nice that they put the pool in a completely different spot. So I included the pool conditions that we now use for the pool that originally wasn't permitted with any conditions. So that was always a little bit good. And then I also had that yearly photograph of the restoration areas there, our native species with no cultivars. And then I know there's part of it that the pool fence is going to be on, but there's another part of the lawn that kind of runs adjacent to part of it. So I just included a provision that permanent markers to be installed to deter intrusion into that native vegetation that's there for the section that's not encapsulated essentially by the pool fence. Since there's a space in between.
Thank you, Jeff. Those are great additions. Mark?
I have a question for Jeff. Jeff, on the condition number 24, providing photographs of all restored areas by December 1st, does that go on in perpetuity?
It certainly can. If we carry that as an ongoing condition and a certificate of compliance, that can essentially run for forever.
How do you unravel it?
You would, if you did it for so long, if you wanted to, you could apply it essentially again for an additional certificate of compliance, asking for that condition to end.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a great question, Mark.
I will say though, there's a lot of new case law that's out about certificates of compliance, where some folks challenged the certificate of compliance, and they had essentially been enforced that they weren't following the conditions, and the commission had not specifically called out the conditions that were supposed to be carried forward on a certificate of compliance, and the court ruled in favor of the permit holder that because the conditions were not specifically called out, that they were no longer enforceable conditions. And those conditions happen to be the nourishment conditions for a coastal engineering structure. So that's why I would prefer to err on the side of carrying them forward than not, because if they're not, then they're done and gone. So.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, we started, was it like 3 years ago? We started being really good about ongoing conditions.
Yeah, we probably should have been before that, but yes, I would say the last 3 to 5 years, we've been really pretty diligent about it.
Great. So are there any amendments to this, or is there a motion to approve as drafted?
Also move.
Is there a second? Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrison, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. That's all we have drafted. Jeff, do we need to discuss Mary Jo Buckland at 113 Hummock Pond Road? Oh, you're muted.
I really wanted to go the entire meeting without messing that up, and I waited till the very end. But the general sense I had was for a positive order, and obviously to include some pretty heavy monitoring and timing requirements on the replanting areas and some permanent markers. If people have other suggestions, I'm happy to, or if that's the order people are looking for, I'm happy to put that together for the 7th.
Can we call out just something about no permanent irrigation in the backyard by the wetland? I don't know if they'll need it to establish the plants, but that's something I'd like to make sure is on there.
Yeah, sure. I'll add that in, and then obviously on the 7th, you guys will have a full crack to add whatever we need to complete that order.
Great. Okay, so we will move on to other business. Approval of minutes. We have minutes from November 19th and from December 3rd. Does anybody have any thoughts on the minutes? Ian?
Yes. So I don't actually have it in front of me. Let me just have a quick look. It's a minor point, to say the least. Oh, damn it. It should be off rather than of on page 6, I think it is. Terry? Yeah.
Which set are you talking about?
I can't find it on my iPad. It's just been one of those days. So sorry.
I think, Ian, if you could find it and then email it to us,
Okay.
and we
It's
can
so
make that
minor.
change.
It's crazy, But so here I've got it. No, I don't. Apologies. I should have printed it out.
So in that case, do we hold over the minutes?
No, don't bother, and I'll just send it in. It's a single letter.
Yeah,
Off
you can,
instead of off,
if it's off instead of, I just need to know which set of minutes on, so you can adopt them as amended.
Okay. So
is there a motion to adopt our minutes as amended?
yes, definitely.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Thank you, Terry, for your always amazing minutes taking.
That was awesome. That was like a
Was that the
divine
Eagles?
chant for Terry.
Time.
That's pretty good.
So that moves us on to reports. Crack.
No, nothing to report.
Okay, PC.
I'm sorry I missed the meeting. I was stuck in another meeting, so I haven't called in to get the report, so I apologize.
What a slacker. I'm obviously kidding.
Those girls said he was.
All right, NP and EDC.
We don't meet till Monday.
Enforcement update.
All right, so not a lot of new enforcements, but I just wanted to update everybody that every Friday for the last couple weeks, I've been sitting down with enforcements that we haven't been getting movement on, and I will get it for everyone to see. I get out my cool little book that looks like this, and I fill out all these little guys and send off our tickets. So if I haven't responded, I just do $50 a day for the week. So tomorrow, for those who haven't responded, they'll get a $350 ticket. And when we fill those out, we send those via certified mail to them, and then we file it with the police, and then it goes out of our hands. And if they challenge it in court, I usually submit like a volume of paperwork that documents all of the enforcement and what's been going on, a little report. And we send a little letter for each ticket detailing why they're getting it. And until they respond, we're just going to keep sending them. And eventually they're either going to get so many that they're either going to cross into a criminal threshold, or they're just going to keep getting filled. So that's, well, there it is. We've already gotten a couple responses off of one of the rounds of tickets. So that's there. And I think what I'll probably start doing with those tickets, I'll probably start emailing you guys kind of a report of who's getting those kind of prior to the meeting, now that we're sending those out. And hopefully I can get an update from, I think Detective Kelly at the police station is usually the one that supervises those. But we'll try to get that squared away.
Thank you.
Friday.
Yeah, the real pain of those things is you're making 5 copies at once. So this will sound really like petty, but it's kind of tiring to write them because you have to press so hard to get through all of like the 5 sheets of paper and the 4 sheets of carbon paper in there that you write like 3 or 4 of those things and you're gonna take a little break. It's some heavy writing. It's like being in like kindergarten again with like giant crayons. So
Got JC on that. He's a big guy. He'd hammer that thing.
well, he writes them for the Shellfish guys from time to time, and he also complains about having to press hard enough to get through 5 sheets of paper on a flimsy like ticket book where you have like it's paper beneath all of it, so it's not like you're writing on like a hard surface. It's hard to get them separated. It is what it is, but we're happy to write them.
It sounds like you guys could invent something easier and probably make a lot of money.
It's called a typewriter.
So yeah.
Well, or what about doing them electronically? Oh my God.
I need the physical.
You are preaching to the choir, but unfortunately, this is the system that we use.
Yeah.
So,
Mark, did you have your hand up?
I did. Jeff, does my neighbor out in Pulpus included on your list there, 311 Pulpus Road?
yes.
Where is he? Unpaid still?
As far as I know, my last update he hadn't paid yet, but yes.
Is this the Hollywood Farm?
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
they're getting them. So
Well, I'm worried too, Jeff. When I went past there like 10 days ago, it almost seems like they've done more clearing, if you can believe it. As
I can. I try to keep pretty regular tabs on what's been happening out there. I need to either get to the point where I can send the actual like uniformed police officers to go collect them, or they appear. So we are inching our way there, $350 at a time. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you for your persistence.
well, so what we're here to do is to make sure that the people who don't respond get tickets, and it hopefully encourages people who do respond to respond in a positive way and get our issues rectified.
And one more, if I may, Ashley. Where are the Cressmans stand on the Pulpus Road, Jeff?
So Joanne and I have been trying to both set up an opportunity to go out and check that site at 300 Pulpus Road and kind of coordinate through Jeff Blackwell, who did their permitting, because we need to go take a look at their at all of their debris removal and pickup, because I think we have some concerns that I know I was by there today that, excuse me, they're still parking cars kind of down in that area, and to get that rectified. So that is on our to-do list. It's been bumped from storms and things.
Thank you, Jeff. Seth, it looks like you have a question or comment.
Through Naked Wines, I'd like to have that.
Sure. How much how many dollars in tickets do you need to rack up in order to move into a criminal scenario?
So it depends a little bit. Usually when you get to, I think the threshold, I believe, is usually right around like $2,500 or $3,000. But you can speed it up if you request it and you get a few in there. I kind of leave that call to, if we haven't gotten any movement, a little bit to the police for when they want to decide to pursue that a little bit farther. But I'll keep you guys updated to where we are with all of that.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other questions for Jeff about enforcements? It's like no. So that moves us on to discussion of 36 Lily Street LLC at 36 and 36B Lily Street. And it looks like staff is going to give us an update.
Yes, I just for kind of simplicity purposes for kind of where we are. I know, Brian is on the line and Sarah is on the line as well, who represent the current permit holders. Just kind of want to let you know where we followed up from the last time in the last discussion that we had is we were able to meet on site with our staff, Land Bank and their staff, and a couple of their commissioners, the applicant and property owners and their staff, and with Rob McNeil from the DPW to kind of talk about all of the issues on that lot. And with everybody there, it's kind of the first time all those parties have gathered. There was a really positive discussion that kind of went through all of the issues that related to the town drainage system, how it impacted land bank land, the lot that's there, and kind of how to move forward in a way to kind of balance everyone's interest, cut down on the impacts and reduce those to nothing, and then have a path to move forward. So after some talks, all the parties were completely interested in fixing that. It sounds like we're going to be looking at some level of project redesign for the site in totality, with the land bank involved for the conservation piece and some of the water drainage piece. Rob McNeil kind of indicated his needs for the easement and maintenance of the drainage system and what that would entail, and that they were happy to participate in the permitting and installation to rectify the drainage, at least for that stretch, with no promises that that's going to solve the neighborhood-wide drainage issue, but at least it would get a non-functioning portion back into some level of functioning, and possibly upgraded a bit. And the property owners have kind of agreed to kind of reset that site and get it back until the redesign is completely done and permitted. And I think they were trying to get to see what the redesign would look like a little bit with the land bank and DPW before they made some final movement on the foundation that they had started to construct. But wanted to at least let you guys know and let everyone know that that's the plan, is to get all the parties together and working forward together, and to not do anything more until that all is rectified and those parties all left seemingly satisfied that with the drainage system being worked on, the land bank's property being kind of upgraded and potentially expanded, and then the development being redone in a more sensitive manner and re-permitted, that would be the better long-term solution for everybody. I'm happy to take any questions too, and I don't want to, if Brian or Sarah want to add anything, I know they said they would just listen for right now, or prefer to, but I'm happy to take questions about that discussion as well.
Well, thank you, Jeff. It sounds like we're at least making positive progress forward, so that's really great. Ian, it looks like you had your hand up.
Well, I do. So, and so Sarah Aldra quoted Emergency Order 42, Section 17B3, that came into existence on March the 10th. And when you actually read it, construction is just one aspect of it. And Charlie Baker lifted the moratorium on construction a couple of months later. And so I would ask, through the chair, I would ask Jeff to consult with town council as to whether they have a 240-day plus window added on, or whether in fact by lifting the moratorium that effectively curtailed it, so that in fact they have an additional approximately 70 days added to the permit before it expires and before they have to come before us again for an extension.
Thank you, Ian. Jeff?
So Ian, I definitely will double check that and confirm that. When I had talked to Mass DEP and our Southeast region person, they agreed with the assessment that their tolling period was still ongoing due to the state of emergency, knowing that, and I think everyone's aware that construction moratorium was specifically lifted, but with the state of emergency ongoing. But I will get that confirmed for sure. And I think if it helps, I don't necessarily think that the permit that's in place right now is going to end up being the active permit once the redesign is done and completed.
Thank you,
I think
Jeff.
there'll be
Thank
a separate permit. And I think that there's also some discussion, depending upon what level of work, that it may be either an amended order, which would come in, which is a reappealable document, or maybe a couple separate notices depending upon which entity is going to be doing the work. I think, not to speak again for Sarah or Brian's client, I would prefer to have my potential residential development on a separate permit from a public works drainage reconstruction project, just because I think that's a neater and cleaner way to do. So we may end up with a couple multiple applications for this, but I think all of the information for either one of those projects would probably be fairly germane to the other application, an important part of both.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any other questions or comments about Lily Street? Jeff?
I did just have one more. So this is something that's kind of ongoing, and we're having kind of regular check-ins with all the parties involved. We kind of agreed to be the hub of the wheel from our staff level to make sure that Land Bank is talking to Public Works and the applicant, in this case, or the permit holder in this case, to kind of keep this moving forward. So I'll probably provide, I don't know if we'll carry it as an agenda item. I'll probably just do it under administrator staff report to kind of give regular updates on that, just so we can all see the progress is moving forward. But until this new plan is put into place, everyone has agreed to not do any work outside of maintaining the silt fence that's there, but no further excavation, no further ground disturbance. Is what's there for right now, and all of those parties were satisfied for what was going to be happening there, as long as we're moving towards the further improved plan.
Thank you, Jeff. So if there are no further comments or questions on this, we'll move on to commissioners' comments. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. After hearing the Western Ave application today, I thought something that might be germane to look at for our regulatory update is currently we calculate structural area just based on a square footage calculation. But as we saw, that doesn't take into account any underground habitable area. So potentially looking at using a volumetric or a vertical calculation, as well as a structural, as well as a surface or a square footage calculation. Could be something that could get us past the inconsistencies of the structural footprint is the same, but the impacts are increased.
Thank you, Seth. That's a great idea, especially after I think it's the North Road property had the subterranean aspect going on. So that's a great suggestion. Joe, did you have your hand up?
I was going to reference 14 North Ave as well, or North, what was it? Anyways, yeah, the entire lot is going to be excavated for this underground habitable space. So I think that site concerns me more than 16. So, but yeah, Seth, I think that's a really good point. Thank you.
Seth,
Yeah,
follow
I
up.
just referenced that one application, but I think it's obviously not respective to the application. It's relevant to anything we've heard so far and also moving forward.
Thank you, Seth. Mark, you had your hand up?
I just wanted to say that I was a little troubled by some of the applications we've been handling regarding massive patios in the 25 to 50-foot zone. And we've never really sort of addressed that and let it and just approved them. And I didn't know if that was within our purview to maybe have a square foot limit but we did several today that were very large.
Yeah, I think, Mark, that's a big topic that's going to come up with our regulations rewrites because I think many of us are concerned by that, about compaction of those patios and overall impact. So I think we'll probably have fairly long discussion with our regulations updates about that. Joe?
So to follow up on Mark's comment, not only is it a patio, but if it's elevated, that's, got a retaining wall. And I feel that that's what's happening up on the cliff. That's why I was asking for the architectural. So, can we get a section through there? What's really happening? If it's on grade, like the not altered in any way, shape, I guess I have a little bit less problem with that. Well, depending on the square footage, but I feel like when it's been elevated, it's man-made, it's been engineer compacted, then I have more of an issue with it with a retaining wall. That's where I kind of follow along those guidelines where that has to be very specific. It can't be elevated, it can't be raised, extra fill being brought in. That's where I think that deviates from the intent of that rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So I know I have more of a commissioner's question. I was looking at the 2021 scheduling and I just wanted to make sure I'm clear with everything. So we're sticking on Thursdays. And then in January, we have like a funny 2-week break where we won't be meeting on, I guess it's the 14th and the 21st.
That is correct. So that sometimes we have those 2-week breaks to set up for holiday weeks in the future. So we have a couple of those in 2021 where we have a little bit of a 2-week gap.
Okay. And then my other kind of follow up with that, just to kind of prepare commissioners, Jeff, I'm probably going to get at your ear to try and schedule the regulations update possibly for one of those off days and potentially the Sconset Bluff annual review. Is there potential there to get those scheduled?
We can look into those dates. I know January is pretty booked up for whatever reason. We did manage to secure it. I know this is not going to be a popular date, but we were able to, if people want to have, we have an hour and a half that's available on Tuesday, January 5th that we could do. Yes, we were able to get from 4 to 5:30 on that day. We have kind of a hard stop that day because there's another meeting. And we could start on either, I think we would prefer to start on the SPPF annual report, knowing that they may take a couple tries. If people are interested in that team. I know you have HTC, Joe.
Did he steal your thunder, Joe?
A little bit, but so today on Zoom HTC, they were saying that I believe 1 week per month they were going to lose HTC meetings because of town meeting and special other meetings coming in. So they're just FYI, they're going to try and run out their meeting schedule on Zoom to the end of the year. So you may want to get ahead of some of these other boards, or just make sure that we're locked in for these. And then, yeah, I mean, we're going to have these other little fill-in
So
meetings, but I think for our purposes, we should lock in Thursdays as much as possible.
So the spoiler alert for everybody is when we send out the year schedule, Joanne and I submitted that for our Zoom dates and times, I think for all of our regular Thursday meetings in late October for next year, because this was the concern that was coming. And I specifically negotiated Thursdays with Roberto, who has Board of Health meetings that day, for us to not overlap. And I believe it may actually be the January one where I put an extra space in because we were going to overlap with the Board of Health meeting. And given what they are doing right now, I took the bump for our brethren at the Board of Health for a Thursday. So, but it's tough because with everyone on Zoom and trying to use the town account and go through TV18 and the YouTube channel, I know regulatory boards have preference, but with all of the other boards and commissions, whether it's SHAB or CRAC and all the ones we deal with, I know HDC has got their board, and I feel like an endless amount of other advisory boards that are attached to them, and all of the other select board and all of those things. Meeting space on the virtual platform can sometimes be hard to come by. So
yeah, they were freaking out this afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, Erica Mooney warned us all before. She's like, figure it out. And at some point, times are going to become available to advisory boards and other things. And that's when Joanne in particular kind of buckled down and we got our schedule in and said, this is when our regular meetings are going to be. But that's why we've had to look at things like a Tuesday for a special meeting, because it's the only time that's available with both Zoom and the public platform to be able to get people to participate.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you, Joanne.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne, for being on top of that. We'd be really in trouble.
Someday we might actually get to go back to kind of meeting in person, which would alleviate some of that, but that's probably a ways away.
Yeah. Dave?
Well, that was my question. When we all look forward to that day, would that day go back to Wednesday, or are you going to try to keep into this Thursday format?
Selfishly, I know this is going to be, I prefer our meetings on Thursdays.
I know you guys all like this. I work Thursday nights, so because these meetings run long, I get done work sometimes at 1. I leave here and go to work.
Yeah. So, but we can.
But
we
I'm
can.
here.
When that time comes, Dave, we can discuss what that's going to be. But I know we've kind of put out our schedule for 2021.
I had set my whole world and schedule to have Wednesdays off, and now I can't change my Thursdays back to Wednesdays.
As my 3-year-old would say, you can blame the Corona pirates. So
Blame the puppies.
No, never blame the puppies.
No.
They just take away sleep. Other than that, they're good.
All right. Any other commissioners' comments? Jeff, I'm assuming we'll get an email sent around about the January 5th date.
Yeah, we're just making sure if that's okay with everybody. It can only be an hour and a half. We can set up the format for that, but I think getting started on that, especially given the report from Mr. Berman and their report, I think at least kind of starting that discussion and where that's going to go, I think would be nice to do.
That's a Tuesday.
I know that's good for me. Ian?
Yeah, so I was out there. I walked the beach yesterday, and helmets, choir tubes now go right into the high tide line. There's no walkable beach there anymore.
Where is this, Ian? Where are you?
This is I went and walked the beach along the along the geotubes yesterday at 2:30, 3 o'clock, just after high tide, to have a look. And And I might add, no, I mean, it's like looking up at a 5-story building when you're on the beach, looking up at, you know, they had a bulldozer on the geotubes. They certainly pushed a lot of material down in anticipating the storm, I think. So,
Well,
but
as the one foolish person who was down there today, I can tell you a great deal of that material is no longer there.
well,
So
I was planning on going tomorrow, Jeff, so thank you.
someone's got to go on the days where it's not good. So that's unfortunately, I was out there today, but I'll be back. I'll probably go back out tomorrow to get some kind of after the fact, as long as it's not similar conditions to today. But it was not nice out there today. That I will confirm.
You're brave.
So, well, it's unfortunately, I will say that I did get some cool pictures from the top of the bluff, and I'll send those around tomorrow, where you can actually see. It's interesting because you can see it, because if you look down the bluff, you can kind of see the uninterrupted, you know, like wave pattern and water that's there, and then you get in front of the geotubes more, and you can see a distinct line where that section of the beach is clearly letting off more sediment than other portions of the beach for obvious reasons, but you can actually see that sand and suspension in the water in the pictures. It's actually kind of interesting to see. So
very cool.
Please do. Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds great.
The screensavers.
And I took pictures deliberately at different angles to be able to compare if there was NSCAR before and after and that sort of thing as well.
yeah, Ian, if you have those, if you could send those in, that would be helpful, because
Happy
I did
to.
not make it out there yesterday. That's why I went today. So
Happy to.
it's always nice to get those kind of before and afters.
Yeah.
All right, so if there are no more commissioners' comments, Jeff, are there administrator staff reports?
This is our last meeting. I hope everyone has a Merry Christmas and a nice New Year, and get some rest. And we'll see everybody in 2021, and hope everyone has a wonderful holiday. Thank you guys for all your time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas,
Happy
everyone.
holidays, everyone.
Don't thank me.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Maureen, I love your hat.
Well, you know, it's the least I can do. I'm gonna
You
try
look,
and keep this up as we go through.
Very festive.
you look very good in it.
All right,
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, everybody.
yes,
Thank
Merry
you, Terry.
I'm
Terry, you
waving at
too.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Goodbye, everybody.
All right, well, we need a motion to adjourn.
Oh.
Why? Yeah.
Everyone's out.
So move.
Motion made by Dave. Is there a second?
There is.
Seconded by Maureen.
Hi,
So
Santa.
roll vote. Beal,
Yo.
Engelborg,
Bye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Yo ho ho.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Ian, you stole my thunder.
Oh, sorry.
I'll just have to say yes.
Great. Well, we are officially adjourned then. Happy holidays, everybody.
You too.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you, you too.